What's up, everyone? All right, so the conversation you're about to listen to is a long one. And at times it might seem like we're talking in circles a little bit, but the reason I don't want to break this one up into clips. I want people to take in the entire conversation because there's a point in it where my guests and I don't agree, or at least we don't understand where each other's coming from. And there's a lot of misunderstanding involved. And throughout the course of this entire conversation, where we cover a lot of different topics, we find a conflict resolution that not only do we find ways to recognize, okay, we probably aren't going to agree on this, we can move past it, but in the process of agreeing that we may just need to move past it, we moved on to other topics that allowed us to get other perspectives of the idea we're both trying to express and ultimately led to us understanding each other. So, long story short, listen to the long conversation because there's some really, really good examples of conflict resolution here that I think will be very valuable for any kind of discussion that you want to actually cut through noise with. So, without further ado, here we go.
Here we go. Is that Mario enough? I'll start going for Mario. I think I may have missed the mark though.
I like it. Wait. Which Mario? Green Mario or regular Mario?
How dare you? Luigi is a person. He deserves recognition. Not
Green
much, but some. I don't know if I'd even recognize someone doing a Luigi impression. Like, how would you even do that? He doesn't really speak.
He does. He's got a lighter voice than Mario.
It's probably the same person, like an octave higher.
Maybe.
Anyway, welcome back, man. It's been
Yeah.
it's been a minute, but it'll be nice to get back on. You said you have some more stuff you want to talk about, and talking with you is always a good time. So here we go.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So I mean, where do we want to jump into this? Because there's like.
Well, I remember you had mentioned, so D&D night, you'd mentioned that the Social Dilemma, you brought up that documentary.
Yeah.
And it's one I've been meaning to watch for a while. It's like I just told you before we started recording, Tristan Harris was just on Joe Rogan. And I listened to that and I'm like, oh, I need to watch this documentary. Because I'm always
Yeah.
kind of iffy about Netflix documentaries because some are absolutely phenomenal, but a lot of them are like super skewed.
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
And so I hadn't cared enough to do the research going in first, because a lot of times before a documentary starts, like I'll actually do some research on it. So like I'll go through and kind of check off, like, okay, are they gonna hit this point that I saw? What's going on?
Right.
And I can
Right.
kind of tell. And sometimes you can really tell if there's a slant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't know about this one. I didn't do the research yet for it. So I was like, I'll wait. But then Tristan Harris being on Joe Rogan, I'm like, okay, I gotta watch it. And then you bringing it up the other day, last week, was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
Right, like that was kind of the reminder. Well, and it was nice talking to you a little bit about it. And I'm actually, that more than anything, that's why I wanted to sit down and chat with you about it here, was because like it has been that, like, that hot topic, right? Like everyone's been it hit Netflix and immediately shot to the top of everything, and everyone's like, you got to watch this. And the irony of it, like, all over Instagram and Facebook and social media, everyone's like, oh, you got to see this, you got to watch it, and there were commercials for it everywhere, right? And I mean, when did it actually come out? I think it came out, like, was it during the middle of COVID?
I'll have to check and see, because it's been out for a minute, and I do love the irony of it, like, spreading across social media. So for those who aren't familiar with it or haven't seen it yet, it is a documentary that features a lot of people who are big in the tech industry. Like the guy that invented the like button is in there, and some co-founders of like LinkedIn and Instagrams, a bunch of people that are in the industry. And they're all kind of speaking out against the dangers of social media, the way it manipulates us and just basically turns us into a product. I think one of the perfect catchphrases for it is when they said, like, there's the only two industries that call their customers users are the legal drug industry and social media.
Yeah. Well, and then the same where they liken it to, like, and I don't know that it was Facebook's motto or what it was, but it was well, not motto, but like within the industry was the if you're not the one buying it, you're the one being sold.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you're not buying a product, you're the product.
Yeah. If you're not buying the product, you are the product.
Right. So this came out it just says 2020.
Yeah. So I know it was a while back, at least.
It was earlier in the year.
Yeah, 4 or 5 months ago, something like that. See, and this is the next step for your for your podcast is like, once we up the budget, you get the dude like Joe Rogan's got that just sits on the side and like looks things up for you.
Right. I need a Jamie. I've said this on multiple podcasts. I'll start Googling stuff. I'm just filling in time, trying to talk at the same time. And it's difficult. It's hard to multitask like that.
January 26th, 2020.
Oh, you found the actual one? Nice.
Yeah. I literally just Googled when was the social. It knew that I was going to be talking about this. So it had that answer ready.
Oh yeah. Google. We can talk about how Google manipulates stuff too, because they talk about that some as well.
Yeah. Well, so Tristan Harris originally worked for Google.
Mm.
That was where he was from. He was like lead designer for Gmail or something like that.
Yeah, he was big on Gmail. Yep.
Yeah, but so anywho, I was excited to talk to you about it because everyone has already seen it. Like it was the Game of Thrones of documentaries, right? Like it was it was the Avengers of documentaries. It's the one thing that like everyone kind of nonpartisanly agreed that like it had to be seen. And
yeah,
I don't know why that's always been such a turnoff for me. Like I was born a hipster in a bearded, like athletic guy's body, but
the beards hold true either way. But the athletic body is where you differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I like to think that mine's never well kept enough to fit into that niche, though.
That's how hipster you are, though.
Yeah. So hipster. It's like ultra meta.
You're like the granddaddy of hipsters.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know what it is, but I think part of what it is how I used to experience movies when I was younger, right? Like they'd start, doing the previews and everything for like this great movie or this great game that was going to come out. And then, like I didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. So like I was never the first person to see this movie or the first person to play this game. And like, it wasn't that I never did, like I wasn't impoverished or anything, but like I wasn't in a position to jump and go see the movie on release day and then like go play this game like the day it came out. And so I would always get to experience like everyone saw it. I think part of it was not caring that everyone saw it because like if I cared, then I'd feel bad that I didn't get to go see it that day. So I think some of it was defensive.
Mm-hmm.
But then another part of it was a lot of movies like I wouldn't see until they came out on like VHS or DVD or whatever, right? So I not only got all the reviews of I not only got the advertising of the movie, but I also got everyone's personal reviews of the movie. And it almost never lined up, good or bad, with my views on the movie. Like I'd either fall center or, like these people would really hate it, but then like I'd love it. And I had to try and dissect why it was that they hated it and I loved it. So like
right.
I got into the habit of kind of waiting for the hype to die down, good or bad, mostly so that there wasn't anything fresh to influence me when I went into it.
Mm-hmm. I understand that.
Yeah, just because like I don't want to and even more so, more than anything with like my friends and family than with like actual movie critics. Because like with movie critics, like I don't care what they say. Like
I never read the critics. Ever since, I never really did in the first place. I don't like anyone influencing what I'm going into to see it, like whether it's friends or critics especially. But it's just like whether you like something or not, any kind of form of art, it's super subjective. And like hearing one person talk about it and making my opinion based off that, it's just horseshit. But another reason, like ever since Rotten Tomatoes, remember when Dave Chappelle's stand-up special came out, and they gave him like a 0 rating, but the user ratings were in the high 90s. Like that's when it's just propaganda bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and then on top of that, it's like you and I will have similar feelings about like a Marvel movie, right? Like so like you giving me a review might possess some value as opposed to like one of my craft beer friends who doesn't like Marvel giving me a review. But
right.
And like his review of a particular brewery is going to provide more value for me than your, review.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So With critics, it's like I don't know these critics. I don't know if I have anything in common with them. I don't know if, you know, if they have similar views to me. So like I'm not like, it doesn't matter what they think. But yes, actually the Dave Chappelle thing was also massive. Like because I think it was. I think they gave it like 0% or something like that. Like
Yeah, it was just completely blackballed. And you're like, no, you look at the user ratings right there. I think they ended up turning them off or something at some point. I don't know for sure. But like it was just such a discrepancy. It was like they had hardcore ratioed.
And I've never met a single person anywhere in the world that didn't love that special.
Mm-mm.
Like, so back onto the branch we were originally on. So I was really excited to talk to you about it because you didn't already have preconceived notions of it, and realistically, I had just watched it like a week prior to talking to you about it. So like,
perfect.
Right. So we watched it both in the same time, in the same, like, you know, going in with kind of the same mindset with like, everyone's been talking about it, but I just haven't gotten around to seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
To, you know, again, we both have fairly common views on a lot of things. And at the very least, we both have a fairly common sense of objectivity, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, it was going to be really good to talk to someone who not only I can have an objective conversation with, but someone who was experiencing it in the same like medium in the same time that I was.
Yeah, and so something I found interesting about watching it so much later than it came out, because I just watched it like Monday, I think, Monday morning, Tuesday morning.
Right.
And I'm like watching this and I'm like, okay, like it's showing some horrific things that these companies do to manipulate us and turn us into products and sell our information essentially. And I'm watching this and I'm like, everyone, like I knew about the hype when it came out, but like I'm watching this and I'm like, I don't think anyone's changed their behavior. Like maybe a few, but like en masse, not a lot of people.
And that's why
It's like they either forgot about it or they probably were off it for a little while, then just fell back into the same patterns because it is so addictive and it's so tweaked to manipulate us into spending all of our time scrolling.
Even during the interviews in the Social Dilemma, the guys who literally created this technology, the men and women who were literally came up with it and are now forming this entirely separate program to kind of break away from it. Even they were saying like, I still find myself doing this, this, and this. Like they literally left these multi-billion-dollar companies that they were high up on the food chain on because of what it was doing and still fall victim to it, consciously knowing what the signs to look for are. So yeah, I try not to fault people for falling back into it, but yes, that like blatant and utter hypocrisy is part of why I wanted to talk to you about it, because like I still have so many friends just weeks ago they're, oh, have you seen the Social? Oh, you gotta watch it. And like, and people are and everybody, you know, everyone was like, oh, I'm gonna hop off of social media for a while and and mind you, I want to kind of go back to something that you said, because I know that you understand the difference, but the way that you said it is actually the false takeaway that a lot of other people take. Our information's not being sold. And I forget which one of them it was that says it, right? But he talks about like everyone's concerned, like Facebook selling your information, Instagram selling your information. They're not, because it's not in their self-interest to sell our information.
Right. Yeah, you're very right. I totally misspoke there. They're selling our attention.
Right. And while it's just misspeaking, there's probably other people who get it, but then like misspeak. So it's
right.
Not to delve into politics or anything, but it's similar to like the defund the police thing. And then you've got the fundamental beginnings of it where it was a reallocation of funds, but defund the police is like, it's catchy. So it's an easy like grab you, right? But technically the message of it has absolutely nothing to do with the tagline. And that's what we do, is we say they're selling your information. And like, we know what we're talking about. And maybe the person we're talking to, like right now, you know what I'm talking about. But If you say they're selling your information enough times and you hear they're selling your information enough times, it deprograms what you actually know to be true, that they're not
Right.
selling information. They're monetizing your information by selling your future. So they're not even going to a company and saying, this is how we're going to influence people for you. They're simply saying, if you purchase ad space, we can sell your product.
Right. Yeah. They can manipulate your intention to pull
Right.
you into certain things. They see like these complex algorithms are all built around seeing like what you react to and getting like
Yep.
they at first I was kind of put off by like the little like reenactment scenes, and especially the one where it's like the character kid and then the guys at the computers trying to like feed him like what's going to keep his
Yeah,
attention
right, right.
on that.
It's very dramatized, right? It's
Yeah.
very, very, and I'm actually, because I've got it on the TV right now, like, and it's paused. I should probably turn that off, conserve energy and whatnot. But it's uh, it's very, very not just dramatized, but it's hyperbole, right? It's exaggerated,
It is,
and
but it makes the
it comes
point
off a
very
little
well.
hokey. Yeah, and it comes off a little hokey until you
Hmm.
get to the end,
Right.
and then you look back and you realize very little of it's actually dramatized.
Right, right. It's just like a personification of the algorithm, essentially,
Right,
so
right,
we can
right,
kind of understand it more.
right. Exactly, exactly. So I had a similar conversation. Well, not a conversation, but like in my head, I had a similar thought process. So I had a doctor's appointment today. I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety and stress, and I self-diagnosed myself with either ADD or ADHD, right? And while I'm normally heavily against self-diagnoses, it made sense. Um, I I never did homework as a child because I didn't need to. I did well on tests with the information that I had. And for a long time, I just told myself, like, yeah, I thought it was pointless because, like, why am I going to do the homework if, if I'm getting A's on the test? And
I was
then,
the exact same way. My parents were always infuriated because I would get just garbage GPA because I wouldn't do any work, but then my test scores would be like 90th percentile on the standardized stuff.
right, right.
Yeah, I was
So,
infuriating as a child.
and it can be, and in your case, probably is just an exceptional intellect and an ability to retain information, right?
Oh,
Um,
I don't know about
right,
that, but
to an extent. So for me, uh, I convinced myself that it's because I thought homework was, dumb, and like I was fighting the system, right? But once I got into college, I realized when I had some classes where I had to do the homework, and I could, but I procrastinated a lot, and it's because I needed that extreme level of like adrenal output to perform. I didn't procrastinate because I was lazy and like, oh well, this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to do it last minute. I did it because it was the only way I could get it done. I'm so disorganized, not in my head, but physically when it manifests. I'm so disorganized, and it's because somebody posted something the other day that kind of triggered me, and it was one of those cartoons of. And this could be a perfect example of exactly what we're discussing, but it was one of those cartoons of this is what uh, ADHD actually is, right? And I checked all of the boxes, every single one, like 100% of them. It was, um, I have so much anxiety about like little things. I don't get great anxiety about like big things because I have a relatively pragmatic and logical mindset. But I'll get anxiety about things that directly involve me that are small. And it's because I'm very good at looking at, okay, I moved into this house, right? I I need to bring all my things over. I didn't feel like like buying a bunch of cardboard boxes. I can use my hamper and my drawers. And I go through like how I'm going to do all this. And then like my friend came over to help me move, and I realized I hadn't even packed anything.
mm,
and and it made the process a little bit more cumbersome. I got everything moved over in 2 days just using his truck and my car. But the place still isn't unpacked. Like, I've got
Yeah.
camping gear over there. I've got, like, I haven't put all my dishes away. I've got, I unpacked the computer stuff and set up my computer room. I unpacked the living room stuff and set up the living room. And I packed up my bedroom stuff and set up the bedroom and then the bathrooms. But like, that was it. Like, I didn't unpack things that like I don't use every single day. So part of what I realized was I'll put together in my head a list of like, all right, here's the 20 things that I need to do. And here's the time I have to do them in. And then I will become so indecisive when I'm prioritizing things that prioritizing and making that list becomes as overwhelming as doing the task. And I need to take a break. Like, mentally, I have to sit back and like gather myself. And then sitting back and gathering myself turns into exhaustion because I've expended so much energy trying to figure out how to organize everything that I could have just done it. And then the next time I come back to it, I burn myself out trying to figure out how to do it again. And I remember there was a test that I was taking years and years ago, right? And a buddy of mine suggested for studying that I take Adderall. I don't have a prescription for Adderall, so it wasn't the right way you're supposed to do it. But I was like, yeah, why not? So he gave me an Adderall. He told me, he's like, you haven't done it before, just take half. I took half, and I was the most productive I've ever been in my life. Like, I mean, dude, I got everything done so fast that I realized things that for months I had been needing to get done and immediately got in action. I got maybe a week's worth of work done in a day. And
that's crazy.
It is. So, and I had considered like maybe I should get a prescription for Adderall, but the catch is Adderall, Ritalin, cocaine, right? And I'm not saying that as a like that's what they are. No, I'm putting it in the same category. Whether you
Adderall is amphetamine. It's like a molecule or two away from methamphetamine.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So, meth, coke, Ritalin, Adderall. I don't want to do these things. I don't want to do meth for the slew of obvious reasons. And when I was working out all the time, when I was a personal trainer, right, I got into some of the best shape I've ever been in my life, and I had a couple of friends who put in slightly less work and they were shredded. And like I was built, but like I didn't have all of the definition I wanted. Like I'd get to like 8%, 9% body fat, but like I couldn't really go over that edge without like quitting my job and like leaving my friends.
Right, like putting all of your time and effort into diet and exercise.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out like how all these people did it, and that was actually, I was maybe 24, 25 at the time. It was like right before I met all of you guys, and that was when I discovered, because I was completely oblivious to it. Like I didn't smoke weed for the first time until I was 29, right? So that was when I discovered everybody does coke. And I didn't know that. I had so many friends that regularly and habitually used cocaine.
Yeah, it blew my mind when I saw how like widespread it is.
Right. And in the movies, they make it seem like this, like, like it's only rich white guys that are like have so much money that they blow it on coke and hookers. But like, no, it's like regular people.
Yeah, like CPAs and like people who just have normal quote unquote office jobs.
Yeah.
They're just going home and ripping it.
Yeah, and then I got into bartending in the city scene and realized, like, again, like that's the only reason half these guys and girls can party all day, day drink all day, go into work, bartend till 2:00 in the morning, drink after our hours till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then wake up at 8 in the morning and go to the gym to meet me at the gym to then continue.
Yeah.
So again, I know we do the tangents, but
oh, you're good, man. That's why I love it.
So it brings it back to, so I had a consultation today with somebody who works in holistic medicine, and I have my preconceived notions, both negative and positive, surrounding holistic medicine. But again, I try to, just like we do with everything else, go into it with an objective mindset. I try to go in with a fresh, open, perception.
Mhm.
So she's also an acupuncturist. And again, I know that there's a lot of up and down beliefs around acupuncture. And I wasn't going to her for an acupuncture consultation. Not that I'm against it. I was going to her because I've been struggling in my own research to find a natural uh, likeness to these ADD solutions, these pharmaceuticals.
Right, something that will give you the same kind of like motivation and like upping effect, but without the potential consequences and side
Exactly,
effects.
exactly. So, and it's similar to the conversation that I have with some of my vegan friends as far as like protein consumption, right? Like, oh, well, you can get protein in legumes and then this, that, the other. Well, you can, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I 100% support it. But to the same extent, the amount of legumes you would have to eat, like weight ratio wise, compared to the amount of beef you would have to eat weight ratio wise, is vastly different.
Right. Plus,
And
then you got to factor in bioavailability, and there's all these other factors.
exactly. But that falls into the same thing with holistic medicine, right? So like there are a lot of natural remedies to things, but the reason that pharmaceuticals are so powerful is because they're powerful. That's why.
Right.
It's the difference between a bang and a cup of coffee, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a cup of coffee doesn't do it for someone who takes pre-workout before every gym session, because you're dosing to go into the office with 110 milligrams of caffeine, and they're dosing to go into a bar shift or go into the gym with 325 milligrams of caffeine. And it's the same here. So I, but I wanted to see if I could find some kind of solace, because it's infected my everyday life. Like I'm less efficient in my work. I'm less efficient in my home life. I find that my days off are almost, today's a perfect example. My days off are spent almost exclusively in bed these days, for no other reason than I'm so burnt out from doing what I need to do at work and then coming home and trying to think about what I need to do at home, that I just don't have the energy on Thursdays, on
Mm-hmm.
Sundays. Um, and again, part of it I think comes down to this ADD problem, this focus. I'm expending so much more energy on thought than I need to, um, and so again, full circle. So I had this thought today while I was speaking to her, because I was telling her about my psoriasis, and I was telling her about some of the aches and pains that I get, that I think are directly related to my psoriasis, such as like psoriatic arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to her about my activities as far as like hockey and rock climbing and bartending and all that stuff. I talked to her about my gastrointestinal issues. Great fun for today's podcast. I spent most of my morning on the John today. Like, sorry, John. But I and as I'm saying them, and it's funny because like again, you've got these people that think like holistic medicine doctors, and she is an actual doctor. But she practices holistic medicine, and you've got all these people that think like it's a witch doctor, like it's this crazy, like super overly progressive. But as I'm saying these things, I can see that look you see in someone's face when they're coming to realizations. Like she's connecting all the dots of these things that seem like completely separate issues. My gut doesn't seem like it should have an issue with my psoriasis necessarily. Like, yeah, there's things that will connect, but like, are they mutually inclusive? Do they have to be connected
Mm-hmm.
at every rate? I've been having muscle spasms in my back this week. So I went and I got a massage. I've got a very nice friend of mine who runs the yoga studio next door, who has the Theragun, and like she dug in there 2 days in a row. I took CBD, but like I still haven't been able to work through all the stress. I've got, and then I've been having issues with sleep. I've been having issues with focus. Well, and so here's the thing: is most of the things I just spoke to you about are medical issues. My gut, my psoriasis, my back, my inability to sleep. But she actually tied them all in with my lack of focus, and kind of compartmentalized all of them into one thing. And she told me at the beginning of the session, she said, so I just want to let you know, because I practice a lot of Eastern medicine and what in the Western world is considered to be unconventional medicine, some of the things that I'm going to say might sound a little like outlandish. They might be a little, and it's up to you to take it for what you will. And I told her, I cut her off, and I told her, I was like, listen, like I'm open-minded. I'll listen to, because on top of that, I've always had some amount of belief and faith in belief and ideas around Eastern medicine, because it's also not coincidental that a good chunk of India's population, China's population, and Japanese population outlive us by decades, right? Like, and like that happens
No,
in China.
Japan's very healthy, yeah.
Right, but
I
that
haven't seen
happens
China's.
in China too, which
I would guess outside the urban areas, probably.
even in the urban areas, and they're some of the most unhealthy places in the world. But again, if you come back to medicinal reasoning, then there could be a reason behind it. But that's besides the point. The fact of the matter is we know that that the earth provides so many natural remedies for things.
Well, the pharmaceuticals are mostly based off plants. Like your belladonna is a whole series of drugs based on a flower.
Yes, exactly. And then on top of that, anything that you're experiencing, unless it's directly due to like human inventions, is a natural cause, right? Like psoriasis seems unnatural because not everyone gets it, but it's a naturally occurring effect in the human body.
Right.
Muscle aches, muscle pains, lack of sleep, all of
Sickle
these
cell
things,
anemia. Yeah, all these are technically natural. Yeah.
all things that naturally happen. Hell, dementia naturally happens. So, which means if you believe in evolution, if you think of evolution as a kind of roadmap of the human condition, then it stands to reason that if there are natural problems, there are also natural causes, right? Because there's almost nothing that you can point to in nature that happens and does not have some sort of cause and effect and solution. It's few and far between where you'll find something that doesn't have a solution, because that's what adaptation is. That's what evolution is
right.
Enough frogs get eaten by birds that eventually they start looking like leaves so that they don't get eaten by birds.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a whole nother topic that we should get into sometime.
Dude, we can go deep on that, because I want to talk about acacia trees and stuff now. Right,
but it's like the sentience of evolution, right? Because it happens over the course of billions of years. But you're talking about frogs, which we don't naturally consider to be sentient beings, but they're at least aware enough. Because they would at least have to be aware enough, because it's not like the world just makes it happen. If evolution is an adaptation, then frogs would have to be at least aware enough to know, whether consciously or subconsciously, what leaves look like, to evolve to look like them.
I think what happened with that is more less of an intentional change. It's just that the certain frogs that have a certain kind of pattern, like genetic variation, those lines are the ones that survive. Like I go back to thinking about like arachnophobia and some of these like fears that people have that seem like irrational. Like people that have never even seen a snake in person are terrified of snakes. And you got to think back, well, maybe maybe it's like a genetic memory kind of thing. Maybe one of their their ancestors were afraid of snakes, so they're the ones that survived. So that's why you happen to be afraid of snakes now,
Right. Yeah, no, and it is a genetic ancestry thing. But to the same extent, and I like that, because that you're absolutely right. Those are the ones that survive. But if we're just looking at it as those are the ones that survive, then we also have to consider that would mean that there would be billions potentially of different species that we would be finding fossilized right now, right? But we don't. We see slight variations of them, but you're not finding the same amount at once. And what I mean by that is it's definitely hereditary, it's definitely genetic memory, but it would and I might even just be over glorifying it, but it would mean that other non-sentient beings have this genetic memory. So again, um, be it conscious or subconscious, the frog's brain knows what a leaf looks like.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
genetic memory in animals is absolutely a thing. How do you think salmon make these insane breeding migratory
Exactly.
voyages, or any
Exactly.
creatures that migrate and there have been
Carrier
some
pigeon.
before? Right. Yeah. So I mean, like there's absolutely like genetic. I mean, like a fish, like fishes are like some of the dumbest creatures you would think of. They're barely a step above bugs. You know, in some cases they're below that because they don't really have hive minds. It seems like they don't really
Yeah,
communicate
yeah.
in any kind of way we can at least discern. But yet salmon are born and they always go swimming back to the same
Yep.
spot, and that desire and that just urge and genetic, I mean, a genetic memory is the best way I can seem to describe it, but that it's so overpowering they will die in the hundreds of, like, thousands and thousands will die swimming up these rivers that may not even exist anymore in some cases.
Right.
You know, that's just
So,
so strongly impacted there. So genetic memory in animals is absolutely a thing.
oh
So
yeah,
it could totally be evolutionary too, or at least have an influence in the way they evolve.
right. So more to that point, right? So, again, coming back in that full circle. So she tells me this, and then I start talking about some of the problems I have, and then she starts explaining to me, um, not necessarily the direct solutions, because I came to her for herbs and spices, for the witchcraft of it,
The
the like,
apothecary.
right, here's the stuff that's gonna like help you to
Like, listen,
heal.
man, what do I need to go home and smoke?
Right. And I also went to her for like dietary uh uh suggestions, like how to change my diet, different foods to eat, so for nutritional stuff too, because I've always dealt with most of my physical problems from a nutrition standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when I was bodybuilding, when I was personal training, like that was that's how that industry deals with things, right? Is you change your diet.
Right.
um
Right. Well, Sam, the bodybuilder I had on, my buddy who's bodybuilding and competing while he's going through chemo, like diet's a huge factor of that. And he talks about it in depth. I mean, not only in my podcast, but everywhere he's ever, like, social media, all over the place. Like, diet is such a huge thing.
Yeah, well, and paraphrasing, and feel free to correct me later if I'm remembering this incorrectly. But I remember when John was telling me about his fight with cancer, and one of the reasons he was like so adamant about keto is because he was essentially told by his doctors, like, "Hey, even on chemo, like you're gonna die,"
Mm-hmm.
and so he took himself off and switched his diet and like essentially fought cancer, at least as far as his best, you know,
Right. I
idea.
mean, doctors all said he was going to die. He changed his diet and homeboy's still here
Right. So
and healthy.
again, back on that track, back onto that main branch, so she starts explaining to me how these parts of my body are connected. And again, from being in school for physical therapy, like I know how a lot of these things are connected, but I just don't think of you don't think of them in your day to day, right?
Right, because you're always taught different body systems as being separate. Like one day you're taught the endocrine system, the next day you're doing cardiovascular. You
Right.
don't like it's you don't really get that
That's like
holistic approach where you see how it's all connected. Because I mean, now that we see the science about gut bacteria and how your gut biome is and how that affects literally everything in your body, just the bacteria
exactly.
that's in your gut based on what you eat.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Well,
a
and
whole new way to look at medicine.
we talk about that in ANP1 and ANP2, right? Anatomy and physiology. We do discuss how they're connected, but we spend a whole day or a whole chapter on the endocrine system. We spend a whole day on the pituitary gland. We spend a whole section on there's an entire chapter that's just the musculoskeletal system. So you talk about all of them individually, and you do discuss in both classes how those things are connected, but that's the small part, right? You have a test at the end of this chapter, or at the end of the semester, right? You take your final, and your final's 50 questions long, and 3 of those questions might be directed at the connection between all of the systems and how they all deal together, but most of the questions are about the individual systems.
Right.
So she starts speaking to me about how they're all connected, but then she puts it to me in Eastern medicine terminology, and it's very like Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? Like it's and it is. It's talking about how the heart is the fire organ, and the your liver is the wood organ, your kidneys are the water organs, and I forget what she said earth was, but she goes through and she speaks about them in terms of, again, elements. And especially like being someone who works in the medical field, from a Western medicine perspective, like and from just general knowledge perspective, right? Like it sounds crazy because you're like I'm not made of wood and fire and water and earth.
It sounds
So
very woo, very woo.
right, it does. It sounds very woo. So and that's actually the piece I forgot to factor in, was that I just recently started experiencing heartburn. And 2 of the things that I never put on a timeline, only one of them I did put on a timeline, and then I just kind of set it aside as a minor explanation, and then another one I never put on a timeline, right? So I experienced my first bout with psoriasis when I was up in Ohio, and I was serving and bartending at Cedar Point, and I got the call that my grandmother had a heart attack, and they weren't sure, and she was going to need to have surgery, and they didn't know if she was going to make it through. And I called her, and I got to talk to her, and she was super weak, and I told her, I was like, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. I'll be back, I'll be back, and like we'll deal with this. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, of course, like, no, you raised me, of course I'm gonna be there. She's like, no, I mean, because you completed your doctorate while you're up there. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you're a doctor now, right? Oh, you're not? Okay, well then there's nothing you can do. Like, I'm going to be in surgery. I'll take care of it. She's like, you're doing what you need to do for you right now. She said, stay up there. And then after all this is done, when you're ready to come back, like, come back. Essentially told me, like, you're not a doctor. You can't do anything about it. Why are you hopping on a plane tomorrow?
Yeah.
I was doing what I needed to do for me financially. Like, I was getting my bills taken care of. I was, getting my life set up, because I'd quit my job to move 1,500 miles away with 5 sets of clothes and $30 to try serving and bartending, which I'd never done before. And I was a relatively shy person at the time, so like it was a lot for me. But that was my first bout with psoriasis, right? It was when she was going through her heart attack and her heart surgery and all that. That's when it all presented. So I've always associated it with stress, and I've also noticed that when I go through high periods of time where I'm heavily stressed, it gets exacerbated. That's when it itches. That's when it burns. That's when it's uncomfortable. It turns red. That's when my skin gets flaky, and like that's when it's the worst. So I put that on that timeline as to when it started, but I had never associated it since then, right? So I go through all of the problems that I'm having. And the next big, like, major one was I started getting, I was sensitive in my fingertips and my toes. And like, it was a pretty bad pain, and my joints were starting to, freeze up. And like my hand was almost unusable one day because of how much pain I had in it. And I talked to my pops about it and told him, because I'd done some research. I was like, I think I have diabetes, because diabetes runs heavily in my family. My mother had diabetes. My grandfather had diabetes. My aunt had diabetes. So, and he laughs, and he's like, there's no way. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, as much as you work out, as clean as you eat, because at the time I was, very fit, He's like, there's a 0% chance you have diabetes. It's not diabetes. So then I started doing more research, and I started associating it with potentially psoriatic arthritis, because it presents in very similar ways. And I didn't have any other diabetic symptoms. But I was starting to get fatigue as well, which is also a symptom of both. So I'm telling her about all this, right? This is the next major thing, because psoriasis was like a big thing in my life. And then this was the next major thing. So she tells me, she asks me, she goes, was there anything else going on with your grandma at the time? Like she's a fucking psychic, pardon my French. But like she's a psychic or something. And I'm like, yeah, actually. I started experiencing all of these symptoms of psoriatic arthritis when my grandmother was dying.
Stress has a profound effect on the human body.
It is, and I only connected the stress. I didn't connect the two stressors, right? I didn't connect that it was my grandma both times, which is the most stressed I've ever been in my life, obviously. And then I didn't connect the psoriasis and the psoriatic arthritis in that manner. Like, obviously, psoriasis would be the precursor to it and essentially the cause of it. But I didn't connect that it was a major flare-up of psoriasis starting to present in my head and my chest when that happened, and then a major flare-up of an entirely other massive symptom at that same time of extreme stress. So this lent a little bit more credence to, like, all right, she knows what she's talking about, right? And then she starts talking about how my liver, and I've had liver issues before, so she starts connecting how your liver affects your heart, how your kidneys affect your liver, affect your heart. And again, I told you, heartburn was another one of those things, which I didn't experience for the first time until last year. I thought I was dying. I was like, what is this? And then someone was like, oh no, you're just having heartburn. And I've always heard that, like, oh, it's just heartburn. And until I had ever had it, it seemed like, oh, and it's just heartburn. Nah, man, that shit sucks. Like that'll put you down for a day. You can't eat. Hell, I got heartburn drinking water once.
Right. Well, I mean, think about what it is. Like it's literally acid coming up your esophagus.
Yeah.
Like coming out of the container it should be in, and that's why people who have like GERD, like gastroesophageal reflux disease,
right,
like it eats away at your stomach lining, or like the esophagus lining, really, and it comes up high enough, it can have a lot of issues with, of course, eating, and then just your circulatory system. You can start like ulcers.
Yeah. So, and I promise everyone, like, we're getting back to the social dilemma. This is a full circle tangent.
I'm so curious where it's going to. This whole time I've been like, it's a great ride. I'm curious.
Yes, yeah. But like, this isn't what we were talking about. So she's talking to me in these Eastern medicine terms, as far as like the wood organ, the fire organ, the body's water system, et cetera, right? And then it occurs to me in my own head while she's saying this, that everyone looks at like ancient Chinese wisdom, right? To be like so stereotypical. Everyone looks to this and is like, haha, this crazy old, Asian dude is talking about the fire in the body and the earth in the body and the wind in the body and this, that, the other. He's crazy. As someone who consistently, in order to explain myself, because I do tangent and because I am long-winded, and I'm sometimes not sure, and I think some of it's an insecurity. I think some of it, I'm long-winded because I'm uncertain if the person I'm speaking with is comprehending what I'm saying, and not because they're dumb, but like, am I explaining it efficiently, right?
Right, yeah, I get that for sure.
And as long as I'm talking, like, it's obviously not efficient, but I get the point across. Well, I'm someone who very, 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 very frequently, like daily, uses analogies to explain myself. And it occurred to me, similar to the realization that they make in movies when they're trying to teach all of us in America that like people that speak other languages are actually also people. because we have that, because you have that disconnect.
Yeah.
Just like I think it's Daniel Tosh's joke, or no, Howie Mandel. Howie Mandel does this thing like back back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, where he's doing stand up and he's talking about the way that we slow, and obviously lots of comedians have done it, but I just really liked his delivery because he's talking about how he's like, why is it that here in America, like when someone doesn't understand us, we speak louder and slower, like all of a sudden they're going to understand it. And lots of comedians have done it, but and I'm sure it's happened, but I've never heard anybody do it the way that he did it. He goes like, let's try it, right? So I'm talking and I'm like, and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't understand it. And you go, like, just because it's louder and slower doesn't make it a thing. And we do it because to an extent we dehumanize people that we don't understand, because like, if you don't speak Spanish and they don't speak English, you can't communicate. If you don't speak dog and this person doesn't speak dog, you can't communicate. And while that sounds really awful, it is, subconsciously, because we're a species of people that communicate, everyone that can't communicate with us seems like a different species.
Or just like the other, like they're not us.
Exactly.
Not to be necessarily dehumanizing, but it's very like, if you have that barrier to communicate, communication is so fundamental to the human experience. Like, we're social creatures, right? Like, the only reason we're able to be what we are now is because we could work together, and communication, of course, is a key part of that. I mean, look, we're literally like, this is just us communicating. Like, there's appeal in just talking. Like, it's so important to us that people make millions of dollars doing it.
Yeah. Well, and and again, there's another perfect example is I just used 12 more analogies to explain that we're looking at this literally like, haha, crazy, Asian guy thinks that there's fire in me. But like, it could very well be that even tens of thousands of years ago, when all of this was starting, that it was simply analogies. Like that was the most simplistic way when we started discovering medicine to explain it to people.
Right. Well, they may not have known any better either. They just realized that, okay, well, the heart pumps blood keeps me warm. Okay, well, there's the fire. There's the fire of your spirit. Let's say, okay, well, your lungs, of course, you're moving air in and out. Well, there's the air, So like all of those things, like, and as you start learning more about it,
your kidneys filter everything in your urine system. There's your water right there. The way that your liver works, like it's all, and that's just it. Like, that occurred to me for the first time in 32 years of life on this planet, as someone who already had all of the different things that we've talked about in my head. That occurred to me for the first time this time is oh shit, these are just analogies. And it wasn't presented that way, but that's how it was received, right?
Right. So we look at it so literally.
Yeah. Right. So which opened me up to, all right, cool. I'm going to start, I'm going to take her advice on these holistic medicines to use. So back into the social dilemma, right? So these preconceived notions that I had going into this, to have this conversation with her talking about the way that the elemental organs of your body, right, are all things that were that I was susceptible to hearing already, based on some of the things that have popped up in my day to day. But I was looking for a change of focus, my ability to clear my head and get back on track. And part of my attachment to technology is it breaks focus for me, right? Or rather, it refocuses me. Like, my brain gets scatterbrained and I forget what I'm doing, and and it's real easy for me to get that dopamine hit that they talk about by opening this up and looking at, oh, I've got this email. Oh, this person hit me up on Snapchat. Oh, here's a message for for work. It gives me something to hone in on. So one of the things that bothered me when I had all of these people telling me I had to watch this, right? I have to watch the Social Dilemma. It'll change your life. and it has. I don't want that to be lost. It has. But it comes back to like what I've always told people. When you got all the people that are like, oh, I don't use this, that, and the other because they're taking your information or like they're spying on you. And I've always said, like, it's never that I didn't think that they were spying on you. Like, they can, yes.
Well, they definitely are. Edward Snowden proved that.
Right, you constantly have a microphone and a camera on you at all times, and a GPS system, and something that tracks what you're doing when you post where you're going on, and that tracks all your behaviors. But I've also always said to those same people, because they're like, yeah, the government's watching you, and I'm not saying that they're not, but I've also told those people, if you think that you as an individual are important enough for them to care about, you're wrong. And that's not entirely false. They don't care what you're doing. And it turns out they might not know what you're doing. Because again, it's not in Facebook or Instagram's best interest to share that information. Mm-hmm. However, Facebook and Instagram can guarantee you that if you're willing to pay for this ad, they can guarantee X amount of output, right? They can guarantee an ROI.
Do I get like ad offers to boost my posts every time I do anything on the Tyndall's Razor Facebook page, every single freaking time. Yeah, and they gave me a free boost when I made the page, and I used it on they used it to promote one of my episodes, and that one got a lot more listens. So it got out to a lot more things, and I'm like, this, there's like, I'm so. Like, there used to be, before they got a lot of this algorithm stuff going on, you could just have organic growth.
Right.
But now, like, you have to game the system. It's like I was looking at, like, I want this to be an organically grown podcast, and so far, I mean, it pretty much has been. I've used social media, but I've only used that boost once because it was free. I haven't paid for it ever. But like, it's there's a lot of, like, while you're looking into getting into copywriting, freelance style, and I just said like a biggest nerd ever. So getting into freelance copywriting and looking on like sites like Upwork and seeing what's available, and a lot of it is like search engine optimization. Like, you're basically you're hiring someone to kind of game the system.
Yeah.
To make sure you get to play the algorithms basically. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I started researching into it, and I'm like, God, this is just it's not. I mean, it's not like dishonest, but it feels so skeevy.
Right. So I took some notes while I was rewatching it today, because I just needed to refresh my memory on some of the things that like so blindly outraged me, right? And they're not saying don't use Facebook. They're not saying don't use Instagram. They're not saying delete all your social media. And that's what everyone took out of this. Everyone took, like,
the one guy with the dreads was saying that, but but he also, the one guy with the dreads was saying that, but he was like, I know it's not, I know, like, maybe only, he said towards the end, he's like, I know people aren't going to delete their social medias en masse, but maybe a couple will, and that's enough.
Right.
So they had different takes. Some are more extreme than other ones. For the most part, they urged moderation, and they told different tactics to achieve that moderation.
Right. Exactly. So, but the main thing that everyone took away from it, I'm going to kind of read some of my notes here. So, like,
yeah, please.
Is the wrong takeaway. Like, they're taking your time and your attention, and that we're the product. And that's one of the things that same guy you were talking about, I've got his name here, Jaron, or Jaron, or however it's pronounced, Jaron Lanier.
Did you have saved what he did? Because I can't remember the first thing it said that he did.
Oh, so he
founded something, right? He's a computer scientist.
Well, he's a computer scientist. He's a composer. He's a visual artist, and he's an author. He still, I believe, currently also is a researcher for Microsoft. He currently works for Microsoft, but he comes in right after one of the guys is like, they're taking your time and your attention, like, and people are like, yeah, they're taking all of our time away from our families, and they're taking our time away from this, and they're taking our attention, and they're selling us, like, we're the product. And then he comes in, he says, no, that's an oversimplification of it.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah. Dig into that. That's so good.
He says that's too simplistic. And he says, It's the gradual, slight, imperceptible changes in your own behavior and perception that is the product. They're not selling you. They're selling their ability to change who you are. They're selling your future. They're not selling you. They're selling your future. I'm not saying that I will guarantee that there will be 10 people in your tap room tonight. I'm telling you that if you let me advertise for you, that you will see 100 people in your tap room over the course of time. And that's what they're doing, right? So the wrong takeaway from this is that the message here was that they know where we are all the time and they know what we're doing. The actual takeaway is that they're using that information to control those perceptions. There is no monetization of exactly, and again, this is why I discussed this, going back to the tangent that I looped around in. We learn about the fact that they can see everything you're doing. We learn about the fact that they can hear everything you're doing. We learn about the fact that they know where you are at all times. And we even at times touch about how those things are connected. And then everyone takes out of it that psoriasis was started because of the stress of my grandma. Everyone takes out of it that them knowing these things about us is evil and that they're going to use them for nefarious deeds. They're not. They're simply selling the guarantee that they can change it.
Right, like, so instead of taking like, oh, you live here and you go and you shop there, it's like, hey, so we can start building your attention and getting you hooked on certain things, and we can keep feeding you these different things that you're reacting well to. We can basically predict what you're going to buy in the future based on the input you're putting in now. Right. That's what they're selling, their ability to not quite manipulate what you want, but to kind of put you down a path where you're going to do a certain thing, or at least know what you want so they can put those things in front of you.
They're selling their ability to increase the return on your investment. Your data is their credit score. They don't have any physical capital. The bank doesn't loan you money because you have a house and a car and $1 million in gold bars in the back, and you could be a billionaire and have no credit. The bank lends you money because of your credit score. Mm-hmm. These advertisers are not buying your information from Facebook. And that's what everyone's taking out of this, that they're selling you and they're selling your information. They're not. They're selling their possession of you. They're selling the idea of you. They're selling your data in the sense that they're not giving your data away. They're selling the fact that they have your data. That's their credit. That is their credit score. Their credit score goes up every time someone new logs in, right? Mm-hmm. Every time someone new logs in, it's another ability to monetize, not just for them, but for those companies. It's another potential customer. The companies that are buying from them, right?
Right. So, also the potential set of eyes that they potentially get your product in front of.
Exactly. And then they go on to talk about how we've moved from like technology as tools to technology as manipulation. It's full circle. Everybody watched The Social Dilemma, and they're like, Mark Zuckerberg's the devil. And it's, he's doing all these evil things and they're evil. And even some of these people come in here and they don't necessarily vilify him for what Facebook is doing. They vilify him for being a conscientious objector. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so most of these people came in to Silicon Valley with good intentions for these things. Like the guy that invented the like button. Yeah. The guy that invented the like. I mean, one of the ways that they keep us hooked, and you mentioned it earlier, the dopamine dump you get when you see like you got likes and reactions. Like the person that invented the like button, or that's part of the team that invented it, was like we just thought it would be a way for people to like uplift and support each other.
Exactly.
There's good intentions behind a lot of this. And I'm not even going to say that this is a situation where there's a road to hell paved with good intentions, but I think that it's just snowballed so out of control. No one could have predicted this.
Right.
And the
So
way it's infiltrated, and then of course we add monetization to it. Well, then that's where the more nefarious things start to come involved. It's not so much that's not so much that they're, hey, we invented this thing to do bad. It's like, we invented this thing that can do a lot of good. Oh, but we have to pay for it, and that's where things get out of control and start taking that turn. That's where the road forks towards hell.
right. So and that's part of where this all comes in, right? Is they the Mark Zuckerbergs out there are seeing the solution, and they're seeing the problem, and they're not working towards a solution, and that's where we vilify them. With that, and it's not where we vilify them, but that's where we should be vilifying them. That's where these people are vilifying them. Is in the, you're sitting here and you're watching it happen. Because even they said, like, while they were coming up with these things, they didn't think of the negative things it could be used for. They again, I don't even remember. In Jurassic Park, they spent so much time wondering if they could that they didn't stop to think about whether or not they should.
Right. So much of this is so nearsighted. We're not thinking about the long-term consequences.
Right.
And some of those being like when they showed the stats for, I can't remember if it was there, but I've heard it talked about many times, but the stats for like teenage girl suicides.
Yeah. Suicide and mental health visits to the hospital. And keep in mind, that's the big one. So like,
it spiked. It was very consistent for a long time. Then with the advent of social media, you see a huge spike in young teen girl suicide rates. That's about the time you're getting on social media.
Right. So the other thing to consider, though, is so both of those lines went up gradually about the same rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the terrifying thing, and they don't address this in that movie, the terrifying thing about that is, so you've got this line where it's teen and preteen girls suicides going up per 100,000 people. And like that number was going up in the tens, but it's still astronomical, right?
It's very slow. It's slow increase over time.
Oh, well, like even at the end of that line, it went from like below 10 to like 70 per 100,000. Like percentage wise, it's not a lot, but the idea of a 12-year-old killing themselves is astonishing. So then at the same level as that line, you've got the line going up of teens and preteens hospitalized due to depression. That's the real interesting number there, because it goes up at the same rate as the suicides, but suicides are actually trackable, right? You can, even if you're not right 100% of the time, there's an investigation done and it's chalked up to a suicide. The hospitalizations is a terrifying number, because while it went up at the same rate, think of how many people are still suffering from the stigma around mental health. Think of how many teen and preteen girls weren't hospitalized for it, but are at that same level of depression.
Right. So it's like one of those things where the numbers are very, very underreported, but even the ones that are a staggering percentage increase.
Yes.
And again, imagine the ones, I mean, like we've spoken extensively about my mental health stuff, and a lot of people suffer silently for a very long time. You know, and sometimes those are the ones that end up in the suicide statistics, but so many don't. So you have to think, if we're getting these underreported, and we know they're underreported numbers, and they're increasing so dramatically, that's the actual pervasiveness of the problem is exponentially larger.
Exactly. Like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here. So that was one of the things that just kind of got brushed over, and I don't think it got brushed over so much as maybe they didn't think to include that information, or like maybe they just didn't think about that particular issue in the heat of making everything. So, or they didn't think that was pertinent to the particular message that they were delivering at that point in time. So,
I mean, they sufficiently illustrated the point they were making with that, showing like the advent of social media has had, now we're seeing some long-term effects, and here's proof it's bad. So they didn't necessarily have to dig in much deeper to make that point. And with a time constraint, I'm sure they had hours of interviews and stuff they cut out.
So again, in this full circle method, constantly coming back to what people took away from it and what and this is purely opinion, but what I feel should have been taken away from it and what prompted me to talk to you about it in the first place was everyone's taking away, they're taking your info. That's not what this is about. Your info, let's take it out of the equation. It's completely, all it is that chart. All the info that they're getting from us is just a statistic on that chart to prove a point. The real takeaway from this is what is being purchased. Again, your future perceptions, your changes in perception and behavior.
And your attention. Yeah. I mean, pulling your attention. Yeah. Seeing these patterns of your behavior, seeing like, okay, well, today you liked this. Okay. Well, a lot of people who like this also like this. It's like looking through like their YouTube suggestions. So you watch a video of that right side of the screen, you have all the other suggested videos. It's like, oh, people, viewers of this channel also watch this one. That's how you get sucked into these rabbit holes. You go down indefinitely.
Right. So
the same thing with endless scrolling.
Oh yeah. And they have the inventor of that on here as well. Of infinite scroll. So we come back to why I was so angry. A lot of the more prominent people in my life who had told me I have to watch this, right? Made their posts about I'm hopping off of social media. Like all of them disappeared individually in their own time frames for like a week, 2 weeks, a month. And then eventually came back to it. And what bothered me was why they came back to it, right? So we're looking at it and we're seeing the story unfold and we're saying, oh, I'm spending so much time on social media that I'm not spending enough time with my friends and family. For the overarching theme of this, that's small potatoes, completely irrelevant. Who cares? It sounds callous, but like, who cares? If I had the opportunity to be on the ice 8 days a week, I'd be on the ice instead of spending time with my friends and family.
Right. Like not spending time with your family does not necessarily be a detriment to humanity and society as a whole.
Right.
That's not where the little danger lies.
Right. So while it's bad, that was the tugging on the heartstrings piece. But that was something that I saw a lot of people getting as like a main takeaway, and it wasn't a main takeaway. That was simply the method. That was simply the data that they have on you when making this movie. They know that people react to their friends and family. They were using that as a method to push their narrative, to push what they're talking. Not in a bad way, but to, again, send that point. So that was one of the takeaways I saw. The one that was missed was all of the people that left. They left for their own benefit so that they'd have more time in the day. No one cares about your time in the day, man. They left so they could spend more time with their friends and family. I don't care about your friends and family, dude. Like, I do as a friend, but that's not that. I'm not going to let a show dictate how much time, a movie dictate how much time I spend with these people for these purposes. What we have as the main takeaway was all the way at the end of it. If you were watching The Social Dilemma purely for political reasons and you fell hard on the left, it looks like they're vilifying the right. But I need everyone to like stop chanting and cheering at this, anyone who does watch this, and like really listen. Because if you're watching it from the perspective of the extreme right, if you're watching this from the perspective of the extreme right, there's a lot of sections in there where it looks like they're vilifying the left. And they constantly use the term and the representation of the extreme center to show objectivity, to show like this isn't a political thing, we're just showing how it can affect your political views. Mm-hmm. And then we come into exactly what's going on right now in our world. And again, I don't want to get into the deep politics of it because like my opinion on politics is none of anyone else's business. But you're seeing it with like not even the exodus, but the addition of Parler. You see it with the additions of TikTok and things like that, right? And there's this idea, and we actually touched on it last time, that like that there's probably a good amount more of liberal influence in media than conservative influence in media, just purely based on the nature of what media is, movies and video games and things that are less aligned with the conservative values.
All right.
But,
I mean, it makes sense why the bias exists.
right.
You know, I think that's a big push for a lot of people going to like Parler and these alternatives. It's like Parler is like their tagline is it's free speech. You know, unless you're actually breaking the law, then you're going to do what we say. There's no fact checking or anything else like that. They're not the arbiters of truth. They're just giving you a platform to talk.
Exactly. Which, mind you, from what I've seen of it, is not the case. Because like I've
never been on it. These usually start off as like. I love the idea of Parler, and I don't want to be saying this to discourage anyone from checking it out, but any space where you have like a fully purely free speech kind of thing, they start with those who have been kicked away from the more common routes of speech that maybe are more moderated. So you tend to have the extremists fall into echo chambers, and it tends to be an alt-right breeding ground for a little while.
It's the reason that I got out of our group for a while.
Yeah, and I want to make it very clear. I want to make it super clear that I'm
branched off to make another Chive chapter.
Right, it starts splintering, and they become little echo chambers and little social terrorist cells.
Right, and that's exactly what they're. And I'm talking about like personal experience that I've seen is terrorist threats on there, like actual death threats on there. And again,
people got out of control.
But that's in line with that. Oh, it's all free speech unless it's against the law. Those things that are being said are against the law. Right. So
I don't know the law. I mean, unless you're inciting violence against a specific person or like making actual threats, then that would be. So
I won't get.
My understanding, it'd be illegal. Yeah. Well, the issue with that is like if we like. There needs to be, it always comes back to what we've said from the beginning, is like bad conversation needs to be combated with good conversation. So like,
for sure.
Ideally, like I want to have a large platform where everyone can share their ideas. Like I want to know if my next door neighbor is saying racist shit, or I want to know if my buddy has a terrible opinion of women. I don't want those voices silenced because they end up in places where they become echo chambers and they radicalize because they're just in this constant radical circle jerk all day and night long. You know, so someone needs to be like, hey, bro, that's calm down some. You're making threats. Like you're going to kidnap the governor or who? You know, like people need to be able to say, hey, bro, chill the fuck out. But ideally, but also like I would rather have that kind of a free speech environment, but you have to have everyone in it.
And a lot of these things that are branching out don't have everyone in it, and they're not even marketed as places that have everyone in it.
I'm glad they're getting popularity.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No.
Because that'll bring moderation. More people means there's gonna be more like moderation, not in the sense that we're going to like actively take control of what you can or can't say. Moderation, the fact that moderate people are going to infiltrate the space and bring their moderate ideas and be more rational.
Right. But again, like we get into the like these things are popping up and they're not even marketed as an unmoderated space to speak in. They're marketed as you're from Wyoming and this is for people from Wyoming.
Oh, is it? I haven't actually gone onto the website or really looked at it much. I just hear about it.
Well, and that again, that's just an analogy. It's like you're a person that is blue, and we've had all these social media platforms that are pushing the purple agenda, and now we're making a place where you can be blue because blue is right, and that's literally the marketing. It's significantly more subtle, but it's doing exactly what Facebook is doing, and it's being allowed to happen by Facebook. Like, because again, we just discussed this. Facebook isn't trying to deconstruct humanity. Facebook is not trying to deconstruct politics. Facebook is not trying to deconstruct any of these things. Facebook needs as many of you on there as possible, as many of us on there as possible, because then they can monetize when they're selling ad space to Harbor Freight Tools, when they're selling ad space to Wizards of the Coast, when they're selling ad space to the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, when they're selling ad space. Facebook is not political. Instagram is not political. And that was the takeaway for a lot of these people, is they're like, it's too conservative, or it's too liberal, or it's too this. And it's not. It's completely nonpartisan.
Facebook is not nonpartisan, bro. Facebook is very partisan. I've literally, during the lead up to the election, there were links to factual news sources I've shared that were disparaging it. They're sharing disparaging information about Kamala Harris. The site was totally blocked, even though everything on it was factual. I double checked it from like the New York Times. Half the links on the page were from the New York Times, but they blocked it.
And that's
partisan as it gets. That's why people are rotating to other places.
But that's where you're falling into it. That's where you're falling into it.
All right, I'll elaborate. I'm intrigued.
Right. So, because of that, they're partisan. They're not partisan. You can hate white people, black people, orange people, people that are actually tables. Like, you can hate whoever you want. If you're not expressing it out in the open, right? If you're not expressing it out in the open, if you're not causing a scene, if you come into my bar and sit down to have a beer, I'm going to pour it for you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is the experience you had with this. And we also had the discussion, I don't remember if it was the last time or if it was in a separate aside on Facebook or whatever, of there potentially being more people that own media companies on one side of the political field than of the other, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not partisan. They don't care if they're selling ad space to the left, to the right, to Korea, to Russia, to Martians. It's monetized. Money is not political.
But they're doing political stuff though. So why would that website be blocked? Because you see a lot of instances, and me
the website was blocked. Facebook didn't care about the website. Facebook didn't sell the website. Facebook sold ad space to a person who wanted to link the website.
Well, I linked it personally.
Right. Yes.
And it blocked the website.
That's what I'm saying. They took money for what was being posted. That's it. So you posted it, but you weren't paying them to put it on there. So they're as far as like, we're not talking about pulling things off. I'm not talking about a partisan agenda between taking things off and putting things on. I am talking about putting things on. So again, you come in and you want to buy a firearm from me, and I'm a person that sells guns. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to do my background check and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you haven't killed anyone. Some guy up the road is like, well, he might. I'm still going to sell you the gun because I got a business to run. So what I'm saying is, as far as saying that they're not partisan is, and this is, again, going strictly off the social dilemma. Like, this is strictly from what was being presented in this information, is because they talk about it. They talk about the potential Russian collusion thing, and they talk about some of that stuff at the very end of it, right? And they also talk about how, and again, I promise this will all come full circle, but they also talk about the fear of AI, like the fear that, we think of AI and we think of Terminator, right? And we think about iRobot, and we think about stuff like that. We think about AI like growing so intelligent that like it creates these human-like beings that take us down. But that's not what it is. AI already exists. And I think it's that same guy that says, we talk about an AI, which is silly. It's nonsensical. Like, it's multiple AIs working together, right? And they also allude to the fact that not only is AI already prevalent and already controlling what we think, and not in a malicious way, it's doing what AI does. It's doing it from a logical standpoint. It's doing it from algorithms. And it's doing it at a rate that's, and this is where it doesn't necessarily alleviate the vilification of men like Mark Zuckerberg, but it does put it into perspective. Is everyone's like, why isn't he doing anything about it? And there's a distinct possibility that it
Well, about what? About what you mean? Like, why is he doing anything about what?
About all of the atrocities that can happen with this technology. And to a certain extent, there's the possibility that he can't anymore, right? Without having the willpower to unplug Facebook, he may not be able to do anything about it for no other reason than the same people that invented these algorithms, that invented this technology to essentially mine your brain for data and feed it back to you in a way that would be more profitable.
Do you
it's
think
doing that same thing?
So to speak like mining your mind and like turning it and giving the feedback in a way that'll make it profitable. So do you think that, I mean, obviously the capability of influencing people's minds and making them turn a certain direction, whether it be political or whatever they want you to point towards, like that obviously exists. Do you believe that any of the major social media companies are exerting that power they have over us by choosing what we can and can't see?
No.
Why don't you think that?
Because it's not profitable.
But it's happening though. So they're doing something that's not profitable, or there's some other kind of way to do it. So if let's say, well, I mean, we have to go back into politics a little bit.
Censorship is not hurting or helping their profit, right? Conflict helps.
If they have a lot of Republicans who want to regulate them, but yet a lot of Democrats are vocally saying, don't, regulate anything about it. Let them keep doing what they're doing. They're private businesses. They should do what they want to do. Then it would absolutely benefit them to influence an election, hypothetically.
So again, I'm not talking about, I don't think that they're influencing an election. I think that they're allowing other people to do so.
Like the companies in Russia that are manipulating some things.
Well, yes, yeah, no, that's not a thing.
Or just people doing what they do. But
in the Social Dilemma, they talk specifically about that before they start getting into those other countries that have actual social information or disinformation campaigns.
Yeah.
And they also go into that. So again, I think it's, pardon me, but I think it's asinine to think that Facebook has a political interest one way or the other, because they're specifically stating that there's a distinct possibility that Facebook allowed for the Republican Party to win 4 years ago. And they may have also allowed for the Democratic Party to win this time. So does that make them partisan, or does that mean that they're selling the information to whoever the highest bidder is? Again, if you come to me and you're like, I want to go shoot Joey, I need a gun. And Joey comes to me and says, I need to go shoot Tyndall, I need a gun. And you're like, well, here's $10,000. What's the biggest gun you've got? I sell you a gun for $10,000. And then Joey comes up behind you and says, here's $100,000. I need the biggest gun you've got. And I give him a gun for $100,000 and he kills you. Does that mean I chose Joey? No, that wasn't partisan.
Well, no, it's still
a bigger gun because he gave me more money.
Right.
Now, I could have
it's still partisan though. Right. It's still choosing a side, but I mean, there's influences like let's say in the past they help the Republicans, then they help the Democrats. Like they're still partisan each time. I'm not saying there's an underlying. It's whatever benefits them.
Right, but again, and I might just be talking semantics here, but from my takeaway from it was the danger isn't that Facebook is Democratic or Facebook is Republican. The danger is that whoever has the most money controls what Facebook and Instagram do. I don't think the companies, and that's what I'm getting at, is the algorithms for censorship are already in there, right? They're not changing the algorithms for censorship. They're not censoring the data because it's leftist or right or on the right. They're not censoring it because of these reasons. They've got the algorithm in for you're allowed to say these things, you're not allowed to say these things, and people pay for changes to that algorithm. But I don't think that Facebook is partisan. I don't think that Instagram is partisan. I don't think that Snapchat is partisan.
Instagram and Snapchat, I'd agree, but Twitter and Facebook, I would definitely push back on. But or maybe it's even Twitter, absolutely freaking is. But that's a whole separate story. But as far as like Facebook goes, so maybe Zuckerberg does not appear to be partisan. I mean, for all the shit he gets, he has been, at least as
He
far as
barely-
collecting your data, he's been pretty secure about keeping our actual data safe. It's the attention that he's collecting and selling. But
Right.
The fact checkers, the independent fact checkers that they use, they absolutely seem to have agendas. And that is a separate thing because technically they're independent, but they're just hiring these third party, soothsayers or truth seekers
Right.
that are
Or
their agendas are slipping in.
Are they hiring these people, or are these people buying their positions? Again.
Well, if you're exchanging money for those positions, what's the difference?
Well,
either way, there's an exchange of money for an agenda.
The difference is the semantics behind the word partisan. Again,
let's define partisan because we've been talking around it a little bit. So define partisan for make sure we're working from the same definition. So that's probably where we're miscommunicating.
Well, here, so let's pull up the textbook definition, right? Because
Perfect.
For me,
so I might be off.
It's taking sides, right? It's putting some sort of weight into it. So noun, an adherent or supporter of a person, group, party, or cause, especially a person who shows a bias, emotional allegiance. That's literally in the definition, is it? Bias.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So it is not bias if Joey kills you with his $100,000 gun when you offered me $10,000. It would be bias if you offered me $10,000 and I gave you a $5,000 gun, took $5,000 in profit, and then he offered me $100,000, just asked me to give him whatever, and I offered him a $5,000 gun and took $95,000 in profit.
Right.
That would be bias.
I think a more fitting analogy for the way I look at it would be, let's say I told you 2 things to tell Joey.
Right.
And you didn't agree with one of the things I said, so you only told him one of those things. Only one of those we got to him. That's the kind of bias and partisanship that I'm talking about, because you're picking and choosing what to communicate.
So we're talking about the exact same thing. And what I'm telling you is Facebook's not doing that. I'm telling you that, and again, purely opinion, purely based off what I was watching from the Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, again, it comes down to my concern from the takeaways, because I feel like a lot of people took that away. I feel like a lot of people take away that, well, Facebook was given these 2 pieces of information, doesn't agree with the one, and, so they only put out that one. And what I'm saying is, you gave me 2 pieces of information and offered to pay me to deliver that information, right? And I took the most profitable piece of information and delivered it.
So the situation, would you say that, let's say just vaguely speaking, because it's impossible to know what specifics are moving with some of these things, but let's say a Democratic or a left-leaning figure, corporation, whatever, is influencing Facebook monetarily to let some information through and some not. Whereas Facebook's not making their own opinions voiced. They're just going where the money is, and the money is
totally. It went right one time, it goes left one time, maybe next time it goes left again.
Okay, I think we're on the same page. We got caught up on some of the semantics of it.
We're on the same page. What I'm saying is that a lot of people, and it comes down to the way that we said things, right? So earlier in the conversation, like when we first started this, what was it? We said something about them taking your time and attention, and us being the product, and we're not. Right? The product, right. Their ability to gradually, or the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your own behavior. So again, you're absolutely right. What I'm saying is that's not partisan, and that's what's terrifying. If it was partisan, there wouldn't be any scare about it, right? If Facebook always leaned left or always leaned right, we would know how to balance it. You know how to balance the information you get from your hardcore right-leaning friends, because you know that they're hardcore right-leaning, so you balance it with leftist information and then meet in the middle somewhere. You know how
the issue is when Zuckerberg goes in front of Congress and says things like, Facebook is not influencing things the other way, but then if you look back and follow the money, well, the influence is being made one way or another. That's where the issue comes in, because like Facebook is not Ben Shapiro. Like, I'm not thinking I'm getting an objective opinion than just the facts. I'm looking at like Ben Shapiro or somebody else. I know I'm getting it through a right-wing lens.
Right.
You know?
So again,
so Facebook
and
advertises as
I'll
being
real quick.
unbiased. Let's like Facebook say, let's like CNN saying they're unbiased. It's like no. You both
Right.
you know
Exactly.
you're not biased, or you are biased.
Yes,
Sorry.
for sure. Fox News is biased. CNN is biased. Facebook's not biased. By definition, Facebook's not biased.
But if they can be influenced, they're being paid to be biased.
I don't want to get misquoted earlier on, so let me finish that thought.
Okay.
Because, like I said, crap. I really don't want to get misquoted on that. I'm saying that Facebook is on the left, like so you take your information from your hardcore right-leaning friends, you balance it out with leftist information to meet in the middle somewhere. You take that same information from your hardcore left-leaning friends and you balance it with information from the right and you meet somewhere in the middle. The terrifying part is Fox News will almost always feed you hard right information. You know how to balance it. CNN will almost always feed you hard left information. You know how to balance it.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that Facebook's partisan leads to the hubris and the the hubris that you know what Facebook's feeding you and you don't. And that's what this entire thing is about. That's what all of the social dilemma is about. That's what infuriated me so much when everyone came out and they're like, I understand it now, and this is what I'm doing to combat it. You don't understand it. And no offense, but like even right now, just from my perception of it, and that's not to say that even I understand it, but from my current my current perception and my current opinion of it, what you're saying right now partially is that you didn't take away everything from it that I feel I took from it. That's not to say that I'm right. I
think you took a certain emphasis on a certain point it made, and that was very substantial for you. Whereas a lot of other people took different parts away. But to the point you said, like when so many people are misspeaking, and like I even misspoke when I said they're taking your data. I think people get hung up on that.
That's what I was alluding to.
I think people get hung up on that because I mean I totally misspoke there because for a very long time I had this idea they're taking my data, and I lump Facebook and the social media networks in with like places like Google and like mapping sources and that kind of stuff. So who that actively are collecting your data.
For sure.
Like when Facebook actually is not, like they're doing a whole different thing. But I think the reason so many people
they're all doing the same thing according to this movie. They're all doing the same thing. Again, the way that they feed you that information might be different, but they're all doing it the same way. So, and that's very important to keep your mind on, because it's the same as, again, the reason that I'm so vehement about the semantics behind Facebook is bias is, again, it gives that false perception that you understand what they're trying to sell you. And if you think you know what they're trying to sell you, it's that much easier for them to sell it to you, if that makes sense. You know, if you think you know what your enemy is going to do, you build a defense for what your enemy is going to do. And then if he does something different, you're fucked. And he didn't fuck you. You fucked you.
Let's get away from the analogy and be literal for a minute, though. So what's Facebook doing? That analogy being made. How's Facebook doing that? Let's say I see Facebook as being partisan because I see them censoring certain content and not others involving different topics. It seems like people that post things on the left or don't get fact checked as much, even though they may be blatantly wrong. Whereas some things that have been posted from a right leaning, some things posted about Trump that are factually true, have fact checking stuff saying it's missing context or this and that. Then you go and read the context, and it's right freaking there. You know. So when I see these things, I think it's partisan. So I'm setting up a partisan defense. What's Facebook literally doing to take advantage of my misconception?
So let's assume that that's a partisan thing, right? Let's assume that is a truly partisan, like they want to be left right now, because again, we determine partisan is a not only a bias but an emotional allegiance. So we're saying that Facebook is choosing the side it's on. And again, in the analogy with me selling you and Joey the guns, I'm not choosing who offers me more money and handing them something bigger.
You're choosing to accept the more money, though. Like, you're still
I'm
choosing
simply,
where you're choosing
no,
who
no,
gets
no.
the
I'm
gun.
simply
Is a
selling
logical
the product.
decision, but
I'm simply selling the product. If you come in and buy a $20 beer from me, I'm going to say yes. If the next guy comes in and buys a $5 beer from me, I'm going to say yes. What I'm saying is it would be partisan if I went out of my way to sell Sony products because they were more expensive than these Vizio products, right? I'm not selling you anything, and I don't know because we haven't been given anything on that. Buyers are coming to Facebook and asking for things. Facebook saying this is how much it is.
so you think an outside buyer is paying Facebook to censor certain content, or at least make people think that certain content is not factual when it may be?
I'm
So
saying
they're being paid to
I'm,
sow the seeds of doubt.
I'm saying that they sell algorithms. They sell algorithms to social change,
Can an
right?
algorithm be biased?
No.
Absolutely, because it's made by people. So I'm reading, this is a
Yeah.
point, I just read this in Douglas Murray's book, The Madness of Crowds, talking about the Google search algorithm specifically.
Right.
And he was talking about, I wish I had the book in front of me right now so I could say the exact phrase. But basically, there is like an unconscious bias when you're building computer systems to recognize human things. Like, for instance,
Yeah.
a shoe. Like, you're teaching a computer to recognize a shoe. Well, a lot
Yeah.
of people are going to draw a sneaker. So that can be a point where a computer is trying to recognize shoes. They see what
But
most
not
people
saying.
input into it. But then, like, say a high heel comes up, the computer program doesn't recognize it.
Right.
So you have
Yeah,
to add
exactly.
in different things like that. So that's an example of where the algorithm built by human, anything built by people is going to have some level of bias in it.
Okay, so then let me take that back. An algorithm can be biased, and that's where I misspoke. It
And I
cannot
can give
be
examples of Google search history or
it
Google
cannot be
search
partisan.
being biased.
It cannot be partisan, and that's where we come in.
The
Is
bias
again,
can be partisan. It can bias one side more than the other
so
one. That's partisanship.
you can be biased and not be partisan. You cannot be partisan and not be biased.
All right, let's get away from the word partisan then. Let's just say it can choose a side
Well,
essentially,
right,
or
yeah,
it can be built to favor a side.
And that is simply that ends that conversation. I'm not arguing about whether or not Facebook is biased. I'm arguing against the use of the word partisan. I'm arguing that we cannot say that Facebook is partisan because it's assuming that there's an emotional connection. It's assuming that it is selling to the left, right? Because that's the common perception right now.
That's where the evidence lands.
That it's leftist because, that's the evidence from the social media. That's the evidence from the information that we're collecting still through Google and through Instagram and through Snapchat and through Fox News and through CNN. And because even with your own, and they address that in the social media or in the social dilemma. And that's why I'm so adamant that we have to change the vocabulary we use around some of these things to really make sure that we're reinforcing our understanding of it. Because again, they discuss how if you start to type something into Google, right?
Yeah, the predictive text.
And I start typing in the exact same thing, we are going to see two different suggestions.
Based on where you are geographically.
Well, not just based off where you are geographically, because again, Google has a lot of the same information.
Facebook. And like previous search histories and other things, that other patterns of behavior they recognize.
And not just patterns of behavior, Justin, you've got a microphone and a camera in your pocket at all times. Mm-hmm. You saw that Facebook was censoring something. And I promise you, at no point in time did you get to a direct researchable link without talking about, typing about, discussing the bias that you thought you saw. If you can go through anything, right? Anything on Facebook, on Instagram, on any platform, and see something that was wrong, and then make it to your research source without ever discussing any of it with anyone, then you might be that much closer to having a completely unbiased point of view on it. But if you can't, what they're telling us is someone somewhere through one of those platforms is initiating part of your thought process.
So because I'm searching for things through Google, like I'm searching for certain things through Google, there's kind of predicting what I'm searching for and putting things like that in my
putting
searches.
things in front of you that inherently lean towards your again, your particular self-defined
That
world.
definitely does happen. Because I switched to DuckDuckGo a while ago. The browser, like a search engine that does no saves whatsoever, and I'll search the same thing and I'll get vastly different results between DuckDuckGo and between Google. And the ones at DuckDuckGo, at least they seem to be far more unbiased. It's just whatever the keywords are. It pops up that stuff.
And that's super important because, again, let's say Facebook's partisan, not just biased, but partisan, right? How many of your friends or family or people in general have you seen talking about Parler on Facebook?
Quite a few.
What do they gain from allowing that to happen?
What do you mean with Facebook gain from allowing it to happen?
What do they gain from not censoring stuff about Parler? Because they could censor some of the stuff on. I've seen advertisements for Parler on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're giving them money.
They can censor what we see, and that will pop up. But why wouldn't they censor those advertisements? Because they're being paid. That's nonpartisan.
Right.
Facebook does not care if you are left, if you are right, if you are up or down or center or whatever. Facebook cares about money. So the reason that it's so important to make that differentiator is because, or to understand the difference there, is because, again, if you think you understand what they're trying to sell you, then they can sell you whatever they want.
But so what point can you actually understand what they're doing? Because like by that definition, as soon as you think you get it, you never do. It's like you're turning Facebook into like this like ethereal kind of just like evil computer that's out to get your future and sell your soul.
Not evil. And again, it comes down to it. The same way Terminators, not evil. AI. They're going for efficiency, right? They're wiping out humanity because humanity is destroying the earth. And they're destroying the earth in the process, but at a minimal rate comparatively speaking, right?
Okay,
so
sure.
It's all those movies we watch where like the virus isn't evil. It sees humanity as a threat to the earth, so it's destroying these things. Facebook isn't evil. It sees that this is the new way to monetize at a 0.00035% increase from the last thing that they were selling you. So now that's what they're selling you. Because while they might only get 2 cents per hit on something that on a particular site, that times the billions of people that use the platform is money in the bank.
Right.
So what I'm saying is it's important to, and again, that's the sad thing at the end of this full circle thing is I don't have a solution, but I think it's important that we work on one, which is part of what they're trying to get you into, right? Most of these guys even said that they still fall into those same habits. And they've even said that there's the distinct possibility that this AI has gotten beyond us. So again, at that point, Facebook's not partisan if it's primarily an AI and they admitted to it. All of them said that they still fall victim to it. All of them said they know the tips, they know the tricks, they invented those algorithms and still fall victim to them. That is where we get away from partisanship. At that point, many of us are thinking, acting, talking, and explaining what's being fed to us. And here we come back with another full loop. What angered me so much when everyone kept telling me I had to watch The Social Dilemma, it's gonna change your life, is everyone took away, we need to use social media less, which wasn't the message. It was, we need to use social media differently, right? So, and they talk about that. They get to the very end and they ask each and every one of them if they think it's hopeless, if they think we're doomed. And a lot of them saying no. Like, don't get us wrong. We're not saying that these things are all evil. They can be used as tools. And that was another thing that they discussed that I took down in my notes was that we've moved from a tools-based technology environment to an manipulation-based technology environment, right? To and he discusses that early in the movie when he talks about bicycles. Bicycles are just sitting there waiting to be used. A bicycle never pulled you away from things. This does, because that's how it monetizes your information, is through that medium. That's why. So it changes your perception in thinking. It changes the way that you behave, not to push the left agenda or the right agenda. It does it to retain that attention, to continue feeding you the information that's going to be most profitable.
So yeah, the partisanship's not the biggest danger of Facebook. I should make sure you don't think that's what I'm saying. So the partisanship, or what I perceive at least as partisanship, is not the biggest threat. That's not why Facebook can be a big problem. It's not why these social media sites can be a big problem. I mean, it's a problem, but the bigger problem is much more heinous and much more inevitable.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But that's just it. That is what a lot of my friends took away from it, was the partisanship and the idea. Well, that was the political piece that they took from it, but the generalization that they took from it was that we need to use these things less. And then they came back on, and not only did they come back to the things they said that they were going to stop using, but the very first thing each and every one of those people did, because they all left before the election, then they all came back after the election. The very first thing each and every one of my friends that told me I had to watch The Social Dilemma did after coming back from their hiatus from social media was start posting political stuff. And
that's why the partisanship gets you all hot and bothered.
And that is why it's so terrifying. Again, it comes full circle, man. Like, they're not even telling you don't use Facebook,
they are saying use it less. They're absolutely saying it, use it less. Because so one part I definitely want to get to before we end, I'm not saying we're coming up on it. I'm just saying I want to make sure we talk about the things that they say that they do to mitigate their use. Because yes, we need to use it differently, but we also need to use it less.
Yeah. Well, and so that's one of the things that, like, I've never liked having a Facebook. I started having one, and I didn't have a whole lot of friends on Facebook or Instagram or any of those when I first started, like, at all. I was that person, like, when my friends had like 50 friends, I had 3. When my acquaintances had like 400 friends, I had like 20. And my reasoning for keeping it at first when I was younger was when I left high school, right? Like, because I didn't even start my Facebook page till I was in college, but I started it to keep in touch with some people that I don't get to see anymore. And that's how we all started, was like, oh, well, I keep it because there's some people, like, this is the only way I can communicate with them. Fine.
Yeah.
Then my more recent one is because I've wanted to delete both for a while, because it eats a lot of my time, and I know that's the easiest way for me to pull away from it. You know, when I've got like an ex that, like, I don't want to deal with anymore, that's what I do. I cut it out. I cut the ties, because I know mentally that's what's going to be healthiest for me, because eventually you'll stop thinking about, and you'll stop interacting with, and you'll stop. So I keep it for work. I work in a social environment. I work in a social atmosphere. And realistically, from a completely almost selfish thing, like, if I knew the algorithms they used, obviously that would make my company that I work for infinitely more successful, which would bring in infinitely more customers, which brings us infinitely more wealth, which puts me in an infinitely better position. And like, that's not a partisan thing. That's a business thing for me. If you were Nike and we told you, hey, you're going to make $1 million this quarter selling to everyone, and you're like, awesome, we're going to sell to everyone. And then you told them, well, you'll make $200 million if you only sell to the right. Yeah, Nike's going to make that choice. And they're like, but you'll make $300 million if you only sell the left. Nike's going to make that decision until it becomes monetarily more profitable to do the other thing. And again, that's why I want to avoid the partisanship thing, because that's not partisan, that's business.
Right.
And to the same token with the right and the left, that's proof that at one point it may have been more profitable to sell the right, and right now the left has figured out how to scrounge up enough money to make it more profitable to sell the left.
I think
And
you're downplaying the human factor involved in these companies too, though, because you have to realize you still have to think about where these companies are based out of, who are typically
yeah,
attracted to these kinds of jobs, and like you're just like the algorithm I was talking about with the sneakers and
yeah,
the shoe thing. That's like it's inevitable that human bias or human partisanship will sneak into these, because Facebook, it's not purely Skynet yet. It's still being altered and tweaked. This algorithm is being built by people who may be partisan.
that's part of it though, is according to what they're telling us, it practically is Skynet. And if you look at it to an extent, there would be more credence to the looking to the people and where it is 10 years ago, but that's another thing that they discuss. And we just saw it this year with the growth of the NVIDIA and AMD graphics cards, right? So the upgrade from last year's models to this year's model every year is like, it's more and more and more, right? But we just had, and people who aren't into gaming don't realize the amount of the jump we made. Like, everyone looks at the Xbox and the PlayStation and they're like, man, look at what they did. It took them 10 years, but look at what they did. It didn't take them 10 years. The difference in the graphics cards that are in those two, the graphics cards and the processors that are in both of those units that they've been working on for 10 years, culminated in 1 year, from last year to this year. If they had the technology that they have in those processors and those graphics cards last year, we'd have gotten it in 9.
Right. Yeah. Anyone who is a PC gamer understands how, well, it's like technology doesn't just increase at a steady rate; it's exponential increases.
Yes. So, and that's where I say that partisanship becomes something that you need to focus on and kind of like take out of the equation, because where they were like, and part of that, like, where it's not Skynet yet, according to what they're telling us in the Social Dilemma, to an extent it is.
It's damn close.
It is actually affecting the thought processes, the habits, and the day-to-day lives of the people that invented it.
But that's why it's so important to look at if it is being partisan.
Well,
If you're actively influencing minds, especially in any kind of nation that has a democratic process, then that is a huge problem.
No. And again, it is important to look at whether or not it's being partisan. What I'm telling you is the answer is already there. It is not being partisan.
There's evidence that we definitely need to figure out a way to get past. I'm not sure why we're stuck at the impasse. I mean, I see evidence of it being partisan, where it censors one side versus the other. I know. Okay, let me take the word partisan out of it, because we'll take the word totally out of it. We see. So fuck the word partisan, but it is being biased towards one side or another. And I'm not saying there's the intent behind it. The intent doesn't fucking matter. The point is, it's being biased, and it can potentially changes outcomes in democratic processes. That is where it's very dangerous, and that's where it should come to some of the forefront.
100%. And it is important to look at it being biased. But again, to the, like, fuck the word partisan. No. Keep the word partisan in your vocabulary and use it for things that are partisan. Specifically because if we keep using the term partisan, right? If something is partisan, it has an emotional attachment to that thing, which means if it's left, it's typically going to continue to be left. If it's right, it's typically going to continue to be right.
Why can't partisanship change?
It can, but again, and it does in this particular case, which is, I think, what makes it nonpartisan and entirely monetarily biased. And I get it, it's semantics, but the reason that I'm so adamant about it is because right now I'm seeing everyone all the time like, Facebook's left, and it's one of those, if we don't learn from the past, we're doomed to repeat it. I'd be less interested in seeing how Facebook is currently affecting things and has just affected things in the last month or the last 5 years, and more interested to see the chart of how it's affected things since its inception, where that line is, where these little girls started killing themselves more and started checking in for depression more. I'd be more interested to see if at that exact same line, we see a change in political perception both ways. Because
potentially.
Because that's the method to deconstructing it, right? You need to know, like, if I hand handed you a toaster and told you you had to take it apart piece by piece and not damage anything, it would be much harder for you than it would for someone who knew how it was built.
So
Right?
understanding the risks that are involved with social media use is the way to mitigate those risks.
Yes, yes. And again, that's why I got so flustered about the word partisan, because I watched people who left Facebook for that reason and then came back to express solely for the purpose of expressing their partisan views, continuing to feed that machine, continuing to feed that algorithm the exact fuel that it uses to determine what you think and what you believe.
I just now thought of a way that partisanship could actively be beneficial to them too. Because let's say the algorithm obviously feeds on things that get our attention. Things that get our
Yeah.
attention
Yeah,
tend
they
to be
get
things
it.
that get us emotional or get us angry or upset about
Yep.
things.
Yep.
So let's say even if Facebook is just swinging on a pendulum left and right, just to say like, okay, there's
Right now,
like we see that the right side get mad seeing it's censoring stuff from the right side. So the left's going to defend it, and then you're going to have that natural battle start happening.
exactly. And that's how you hold on to both. That's why Parler's doomed to fail. Because right now, Parler is not, and that's the other thing, and that's why that partisanship thing is so important. Facebook being nonpartisan is what makes it dangerous. Twitter is not dangerous because people that don't hear their voice in that echo chamber don't subscribe to it. Parler is not dangerous because people who, and it's not that either of them is not dangerous, they're less dangerous because people who do not subscribe to that echo chamber won't be in there. Facebook is dangerous because it's not an echo chamber. It's not a true echo chamber. Because again, yeah, you saw some things being censored, but we've already seen evidence that Facebook potentially has the influence to have been able to make it 90-10 one direction or the other. And like, while that's only in theory, there's very strong evidence to support that theory, right? So the issue is again with the word partisan. If we look at Facebook as partisan the same way we do Fox News and CNN, it's difficult to combat. Combating Fox News and CNN is real easy because you know that they're only going to feed you one side. So like, while some of the things might be true, you know to weigh everything with a grain of salt and check yourself. Mm-hmm. With Parler, it's the same way. With Twitter, it's the same way. With Facebook, it's not. Because right now, today, you're going to say, oh man, yeah, no, it's definitely leaning left. Like, here's all the things I saw that are evidence towards it leaning left. 5 years ago, if we were having this exact same conversation, you wouldn't be saying that. And 4 years from now, you might not be saying that. And that is what's truly terrifying.
They also weren't fact checking 5 years ago, though. It's like they're doing things now they weren't doing then that are clearly geared towards one side benefiting.
It was easier to fact check 5 years ago.
What do you mean it's easier to fact check 5 years ago?
It was easier to fact check 5 years ago.
There was less misinformation being spread around, but there's still misinformation aplenty.
Yeah, there was misinformation aplenty, but they didn't have the amount of data that they have right now, which means they didn't have, the algorithm still wasn't perfected. It is harder for you to get injured as you hone yourself more and more in your craft as an athlete, right? It is now easier to sway it one way or the other because of not the amount of information. It's easier not because of the amount of information available to us, but the amount of information that they have on us. Because 5 years ago, tracking us wasn't as easy as it is right now. And they didn't have all of the data that they have about how Justin thinks and what Justin's most likely to click on. And I've started to look at like some of those changes in my own behavior on social media, almost to the extent that like there's certain things that like I never click on, ever. Literally never click on, because I'm like, that's stupid and that's a trap and I'm not going to click on it.
Yeah.
And continue to pop up on my feed every single time. That seems super inefficient if they're trying to sell me that thing, right?
Right.
No, because now after years of me not clicking on that thing, they know that that thing popping up in my news feed, even though I'm not going to click on it is going to cause me to act a certain way, which will lead me into what they do want me to click on.
So what do we do?
I don't know, man.
So let's talk about some of the things that they did. I think it was when Tristan Harris was on Joe Rogan's podcast. There was a point where, like, I noticed I have like a compulsive need to get rid of all the little red notifications on my apps. I'm like, I have an iPhone, so all the little red dots with the numbers that show what kind of notifications you have, I compulsively have to clear those.
I used to too, and something changed in the last 2 years for me where I don't do that anymore. And
I turned off notifications, like for Facebook, Instagram, for all of those things. I turn off notifications. I have a silent, like the red dots, all that will pop up when I have like a messenger message. And then my texts are still normal because I do a lot of work through texting stuff. But just the fact that I got rid of the Facebook notifications, where like I'll start getting stuff like comments or shares, whatever else. The Facebook icon is just the little F in the blue box. That's it. And it has reduced my social media screen time significantly. I was really anxious at first. So I'm like, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? But now I've gotten to the point now where I know stuff's going to be there no matter what. I'll check it when I get to it.
Yeah.
And that was something that Tristan Harris recommended. A lot of them in the documentary recommended is turning off notifications or whatever ones you can.
I'm interested to see if you've read about this, and I'd be even more interested to follow up another segment in the near future if you're interested. The thing I have not done yet, and I've been so outraged at the way people have come back to it. The one thing I did do, and you'll notice, is since I've watched it, I've not posted anything political for no other reason than, and that's not for my benefit, that's for your benefit and my friends' benefit, and my family's benefit.
So they still get sucked into the political stuff, or why are they benefiting?
I'm not contributing to the machine of information. I'm not putting information into there that can be used in that manner.
Well, in this case, it sounds like you just take anything you put in there they can use in some way. It's like, what's the ultimate detrimental part that these algorithms are doing? Like if you had to boil it down to like one really bad thing this algorithm is doing, what would that thing be?
Changing our politics. It will show you more people that think like you. And that's exactly it. Perpetuating these echo chambers. Facebook.
So wouldn't the solution to getting away from that be going to sources like or sites like Parler where they don't actively influence things like that? They just let you say whatever you want?
You would think so, potentially, right? But I think that's part of why advertisements for Parler are allowed on Facebook. I think pushing people into those echo chambers fuels that conflict.
But then the more people you push into that, the less echo chamber it is. So it seems like ultimately that would help Parler
maybe
become
over
a more
time,
viable site.
Right, but I think that they're banking on it not getting that far. I would like for you to find me one, because the leftists aren't going on to Parler to argue with them. They're going on to watch the right? And it's the same way that like you won't see you see less information on the right on Twitter than you do of the left, because there's going to be more like they're not going on there to argue, they're going in there to keep tabs. So whereas on Facebook being that it is nonpartisan to an extent allows for that conflict. Like it blocked your post, right?
Yeah.
But then it allowed you to talk about blocking your post.
Well, because I worked around it. There's no way they could see what I was posting because I just took screenshots of the website and posted them as photos. Like, there's no way for the algorithm to see what the photos are unless it's like shape recognition. But
no, there's totally a way.
So why would they allow? So why it's a workaround?
Talked about something with your friend, and then you get an ad for it on Facebook.
It's not actually listening to you though. It's like that someone debunked that.
Right. It's not listening to you. But that's exactly it.
It just recognizes your behavior patterns and
exactly. It's still
so it's inevitable you'll discuss something that's already been seeing you lean towards anyway.
Exactly. You're going to discuss it. And the very first thing on the Center for Humane Technologies webpage is, as long as social media companies profit from outrage, confusion, addiction, and depression, our well-being and democracy will continue to be at risk.
100% agree.
But that's just it. That's why places like Parler and Twitter aren't a threat to Facebook. Facebook overtook Twitter when Twitter had a head start.
Well, they both
Like-
have monopolies on the market.
Right. But I think we can agree for the most part, Facebook's overrun Twitter and Instagram exponentially.
Well,
Like,
Facebook owns Instagram, so yeah.
yeah.
Twitter,
exactly.
I don't know. I don't think Facebook and Twitter, I don't know if they're in direct competition because they're kind of different things in a way.
They're not. I don't think anything's in competition with Facebook right now.
Well, nothing is.
Right. That's part of the issue, right? So, I one of the things I have not done yet that I would like to do more of is I haven't delved into the Center for Humane Technologies website.
Yeah, I haven't either. That's Tristan Harris's website, right? He's one of the founders of the Center for Humane Technology.
Yeah, and then the other co-founder is one of the former guys from NVIDIA.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
He's the one who they bring on to discuss the growth of technology and processors in comparison to the growth of the human brain.
Okay,
right?
yeah, I remember that now.
So, but that's the thing is, I think I have a bead on what's not the right way to deal with it. I don't know what the right way to deal with it is, and I'm hoping that foundation, that group, has some better answers. And that's not to say that they do, like, but it's, again, I think the disheartening part of it was watching everyone come out of hibernation. Specifically, I think that is the thing. You asked me to pinpoint it.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, the most important thing is to continue having those discussions as far as politics and stuff. But I think the idea is to not have them online. I think the idea is to not, or to have them through some other medium that does not track your usage. So again, like you've got DuckDuckGo, which doesn't track your searches, right?
Nope, doesn't save anything.
Right, and that was
what they say at least.
That was the thing. One of the things pre-IRC is like we had chat rooms where things would go out into there and then they disappear. They were gone. What went onto the internet wasn't forever. Mm-hmm. The issue we have with Facebook is what goes onto the internet is forever, right? Like you can delete your post off of Facebook, but if I do enough Google searches for it, if anybody took a screenshot of it, if anybody copied it in any way, shape, or form, it still exists. I think that what angered me so much about everyone coming back from their isolation from social media and immediately jumping into politics is that's the biggest threat to democracy.
They're doing right back into the same thing. That's the same thing they're doing that was detrimental. They just jump right back into it, missing exactly. The entire point of the documentary.
Facebook is not what's hurting us. We are what's hurting us.
I agree.
Us having those discussions about politics on that platform is what's feeding that algorithm the fuel that it needs to connect more people with extreme right views to the extreme right, with extreme left views to the extreme left, with the extreme center views to the extreme center. It continues to divide us more.
That's part of what I was getting into when I was talking about how a lot of people who are like the same way you were saying misinterpret the point of it. Like, oh, they're taking our data, or no, like I think people tend to go that way because that way Facebook and Zuckerberg is the villain. But in reality, right. they're not like we're giving them what they want. We are freely choosing. Like we are the arbiters of our own demise in this sense.
Yeah. And
that's why people don't want to accept that, because it takes a good hard look at yourself and realize, yeah, these things are capitalizing on our behaviors, but we're still the ones behaving in this way.
Yes, that is what I took from the Social Dilemma, and I don't know that that's right, but I believe that that's right.
It's 100% right.
Is that there's not a bad guy. You and I are the bad guy, and that is why I was so heavily triggered by the partisan thing. Because again, saying that Facebook is right or left means that they have an agenda that towards the right or the left, and they don't. Right.
Well, so many people look at right and left as being good or bad depending on where you're at. Whereas me, like I see partisanship of any kind of form as a negative thing.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very squarely in them, and anyone who knows me and knows this show knows exactly where I'm in politically. That's why I can see both sides of it. I'm like, it's bullshit whenever it works either way.
So, and I'm glad that this went around and it came full circle, because it goes back to me talking holistic medicine with this woman, where she's telling me about the fire organ, the wood organ, the earth, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm coming to the realization, like, I'm becoming woke to the idea that, like, those are analogies to press for it, to the same extent that I don't want to call Facebook partisan, because partisan is bad and Facebook is not bad. We are bad. It comes down to, again, if Facebook is, oh man, the guys at Facebook are leftists, then it would be in their agenda to make us all left. And it's not in the agenda to make us all left. It's in the agenda to hold on to our attention. And if we all agree, they won't have our attention anymore. If everyone is happy, people won't be on social media anymore. If everyone is happy, people will be outside discussing their things. People will be at going to family dinner, or
there'd be significantly less use of it, because there'd still be plenty of happy stuff on there. But the tool itself would be used. Again, it's becoming more than a tool now, but it would be used more the way it was initially intended, to connect people and to be positive things on it. We'd be on it less. Like, we wouldn't be. It's like we were hooked up to the Matrix. Like, we just jump in every now and then to talk to some friends, and then we bump out.
They say that in the Social Dilemma, they liken it to the Matrix, and that's exactly it. Is calling it partisan takes its power away, and
it shifts the blame. It shifts the blame to the organization, the people behind it, and away from us. So they're the villain. If you're on the left, then they're the villain for letting right stuff take place. If you're on the right, they're the villain for letting left stuff take place. If you're in the middle, you just hate them all together because they censor speech at all. But two things can be true at once. They can still have that negative impact, but that can still not be the greatest threat. There can still be a bigger threat underlying all of that.
For sure.
And they can be part of the same thing.
But the issue, and that's the thing.
Just don't let the partisanship distract you from the ultimate underlying evil, or ultimate underlying risk.
It's not evil for making fatty, awful for you fast food.
Right.
And when you come into my gym and you're like, yeah, man, McDonald's did all this stuff to me, and that's why I'm fat and now need to lose weight. You won't lose the weight you need to, because you won't change your habits unless McDonald's goes out of business, because it's McDonald's fault that you're fat. No, it's your fault. And again, and I need to preface this because this is the age we live in. It's nothing against having body fat. Like, be comfortable in who you are, be who you're going to be. But if
be healthy, though, like, don't kill yourself. There's a balance in body positivity.
Yeah, but again, if you wanna, kill yourself.
Right. I mean, if you want to buy a 24-ounce soda, okay, that's your life. Do your thing.
But don't come to me as your personal trainer and say, "Oh, McDonald's did this to me." Facebook did not do this to you. You do this to you, and that is what was so profound about the Social Dilemma. Was watching all of these people, watching it go viral, watching all of these people have such a profound view about it, that they disappeared from social media to 2 weeks, to not only come back to it, but come back to it in literally the worst way to possibly come back to it.
To get sucked right back into the intentional mind fucks.
You didn't just come back to it, and, like, again, we're looking at the information we put into it. If you put more ones into Google than you do twos, it's going to reciprocate with more ones. If you put more twos in than you put threes, it's going to reciprocate with more threes. So you didn't just come back to social media and interact with your friends, which is the tool it was originally intended for, right? Or the tool that you originally intended it for.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't come back to interact with your friends. You came back to talk politics, talk religion, to talk about all of the things that are the reason that you wanted to try and separate from it in the first place.
Well, using the word talk is very generous to the communication that does not happen on Facebook or on social media in general. But it makes sense for them to promote that stuff, because it makes everyone angry and they get super involved with it. Because especially when it comes to either religious or political ideas, because this gets back to a point I make on almost every single episode, is you cannot be so married to your opinions that when they come under fire, you feel like you personally are being attacked.
Exactly. Exactly. So again, I think we've come full circle to what my issue was, and
Yeah.
I think we fundamentally agree
I'm glad
that
we pushed through it because I was frustrated with you for a
I
hot
know,
minute there,
I know,
but
I
and
know.
I'm sure you can see it in my face too. But I'm like, we got to like we're intelligent people. We can figure this out. And so we kept talking,
Yes,
and
no,
then hearing more about where
I
you came from.
too, but that's because, huh?
No, sorry, the Zoom and the chat
Oh
jumps
yeah.
out. We talk over. You go.
The I'm glad. I'm also glad we pushed through it because I knew what I was trying to say, which is what we eventually came to. But
Mm-hmm.
again, in that long-winded nature, I didn't know exactly how to express it until we fleshed out those pieces.
Right. So like my understanding of your perspective didn't come from you explaining your perspective. It came from you telling me about other things. And then I recognized what you were talking about. And then I'm like, oh, this is why he sees this way. That's the point he was making about that. And that also ties back into coming. I'm trying to call this podcast Full Circle or something now.
Yeah.
And or Talking Circles. That'd be clever.
Ooh, I like that.
All right. I already got the website. It's too late.
Oh well, yeah. Our series of podcasts will be Talking in Circles because
that's what we'll do. We'll just do Talking Circles.
Right. That's what I told you earlier is I knew all of these things that I was branching off about connected. Subconsciously, I knew exactly how they connected. Consciously, I didn't, and I needed to talk them out with you. And that's why I'm so long-winded when I talk with my friends too. It's because like I'll have the idea and I'm like, yes, execute. But by the time I start execution, I've lost bits and pieces of it, and I need help finding it again.
Right. And this is a perfect illustration of it. I mean, we're coming here to shit on, not shit on, but we're coming here to talk about some of the problems with social media and the way they monopolize our time and the way we feed it. Now, it does manipulate us to get us coming back for more, but ultimately we are, again, like I said earlier, the arbiters of our own demise. We're the ones feeding the machine. We're putting the pennies in the slot machine.
Yep.
So,
which is another reference that they make in that movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like,
think about it. Like the way you scroll down from the top, like to get more stuff to refresh it. It's a slot machine.
Yeah.
And it hits those same addictive triggers essentially. But so my point was like, so the reason that social media, it's such a poor place, and it's a very, very poor place to discuss nuanced ideas such as the politics and opinions. Even though I do a lot of it on there, but I do my very, very best to.
Too. And since I've watched it, I've done less for that reason, because we are feeding it the most dangerous fuel.
But here's what I think: like it's going to be fed either way. I'm not trying. It's like eating. You have to eat either way. You might as well eat something healthier. So I'm trying to put more healthier stuff in there and get people to like the people that I've seen responding to some of the things that I put out there and some of the ideas that I share from other people who are smarter than me. They're positive things, and then they get you to reflect on, because like social media is not ever going away. We're gonna have to deal with it. You know, we gotta live with it. Say there's like COVID's not ever going away. But the flu's not ever going away.
Right.
It's how we deal with it.
Yes.
Exactly. So there's ways to do things, but the point I was making was sometimes like communicating ideas takes 2.5 hours. Sometimes getting to know and find that mutual understanding with somebody takes a one-on-one conversation where you can see each other's faces and usually not talk over each other and actually get to know who that person is. And it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to really understand who someone is based on what's put there through social media, because people are going to intentionally they're going to tweak their algorithm. Let's say if my Facebook is an algorithm for who I am as a human, I'm tweaking it. I'm manipulating it to put out my best foot forward, or at least the foot forward that I want you to see.
Right.
So we need to take this into account when we're going into these different highly volatile topics, discussing them on social media platforms. You need to realize that it's a poor medium for discussion, and 9 times out of 10 you're not going to find that understanding because the medium does not permit it. It is not capable of giving you the opportunity to truly get to the understanding that you want to find. So we need to reach out. So if we're trying to talk to people and communicate ideas, we might need to start finding different ways to do it.
And that's the struggle, right? Is finding those different ways where, to a point, it might even be a sense of regression. Ideas, while not communicated as fast, were probably communicated more directly and more objectively before social media, because while you typically, if you lean to the right, probably had more friends that were right, so it was an echo chamber. You still, when you had a interaction with someone from the other side, you had a genuine human interaction with them. If you have an interaction at the dinner table with someone who has a different view from you, you can't simply log out of dinner and
Right.
ignore what they're saying.
And you're
There's
also just not just saying something, then walking away, then coming back 5 minutes later to see what they've said before. You're going in and out of it. You're not in that conversation.
It forces you to have the conversations we just had. It forces you to flesh things out. And when you ask for proof of, or when you ask for a reason on Facebook of why someone feels the way they do, if they don't have an immediate response, right? They have time to search for what their response is. And because of the algorithm that they've been pumping into Facebook this entire time, it feeds them back self-reflective answers to help them get to what their reasoning is, right? So
it encourages cognitive bias.
Right. So why do you believe in this candidate? So, and again, that comes back to the partisan thing. That's why Facebook and Google are not technically partisan, because if you have hard-leaning right stances, Facebook pushes you into hard-leaning right private groups. It pushes you towards hard-leaning right articles. If you have hard-leaning left stances, Facebook pushes you towards hard-leaning left pages and hard-leaning left groups. So again, the reason that it's so important is because if you and I sit down at a dinner table and you're on the left and I'm on the right, and I say I believe in XYZ, and you're like, well, why? I have to tell you what I honestly believe in the moment, and that might take us talking for 2 hours to figure it out. And at the end of figuring out, maybe I'll discover that I don't actually believe that.
Right.
Or maybe I'll discover that I don't actually believe that, but there's a more solid, concrete reason as to why I support what I support.
Right.
So, and on Facebook, that doesn't happen. So I think one of the solutions is exactly that. If you look at elections in the past, right? We've had some form of media throughout all of this, be it the printing press and the newspaper, be it television, and we've had some form of bias. A newspaper in Pennsylvania will have different information than a newspaper in New York.
I wouldn't call that bias.
Huh?
Different having different information is not necessarily bias. If you're choosing to promote one over another one, that would be. But
again, we'll present different information due to its geographical bias, due to the who owns the paper and who runs the paper, right? And it's the same with the news stations. Before social media, people who fell to one side watch Fox News, people who fell to the other side watch CNN, people who fell to one side watch CNBC, people who, so, you know, we went one way or the other based on that, and that's where we got our information. But because it was journalism at the time too, and not television personalities, we were presented with information, and while it might have been biased one direction, it was still real information, and stuff might have just been left out. In which
it also
case,
wasn't a 24-hour news cycle.
right, and you got that information. And then your challenge of that information was you got the other half of that information from your friends who had that other half of the information, and vice versa. So that I think part of it's a regression to that. It's going back to our literature classes, right? What are the things you don't write about in an essay? You don't write about politics, religion, and abortion, because those were things meant for intimate conversation. And at one point, I always used to think was, oh, it didn't do that. You didn't talk about it because it's going to cause a flare-up. Well, yeah, that's exactly why you didn't talk about it. And people are like, oh, well, we need to talk about these things. You're right. We need to talk about them. And exactly like you said, on Facebook, very little talking happens. That is not the place that you talk. I do not talk with my bar patrons about religion, politics, and abortion, because while I might be close to those bar patrons, that's not a public conversation. That's a private conversation that I'll have with 1 million people. I will have that conversation with one of my regulars when I'm off the clock and we're sitting down having a drink one-on-one.
Right.
And then I'll have that same conversation with an acquaintance who I have like one of the guys I play hockey with. Maybe we're not friends, and he has different points of view from me, and it comes up, and we have like a quick little tiff, and he's like, well, you know, I'd really like to know why you think what you think. Cool. We go and we grab a beer and we have that conversation, right? That doesn't happen on Facebook. That's why I was so angry when all these people came back from their hiatus and they jumped in and they're like, let's talk about religion, politics, and abortion. Like, why didn't you just come back and like, hey guys, I'm back on Facebook. Justin, I haven't seen you in a while. How have you been? Chauncey, I heard you bought a house. You know, congratulations. How's that going? Joey, man, I hear business is booming. I know we got a storm coming through. You know, is there anyone, you know, you've helped out in particularly recently that you're like really proud of helping them build that perfect home? Like, you know, those are the conversations to have on Facebook. My buddy Darius, I haven't seen you since high school, man. Like, how have you been? What's life like? How's the family? Like, what have you been up to? Those are the conversations social media should be for, not, hey man, my political person said this today and this is why they're right and you're wrong.
Right. Well, a big part of that too is, let's say, like, who's to say if things weren't so polarized politically, people wouldn't have just stayed off the social media platforms? Like, who's to say maybe that, like, they think that it's such a vital. I mean, if you look at how like vehemently people support one candidate or the other one, everyone from every single side, like, it's the most important election in their lifetime, whether it is or isn't. That's probably why people got sucked back into it. They're like, well, I have to make my voice heard. I have to talk about this. This is an important kind of thing. And that hyper polarization is what ends up. That's why everyone starts, you know, fighting and arguing and sucks them back in completely. So I don't know if it's totally. I mean, they may think they're trying to do a, you know, righteous thing. Like, I think I'm trying to help when I'm posting things and trying to share more information. You know, there's definitely a certain kind of self righteousness there for me. But I mean, I just want people to. I'm trying to use the system against itself.
Yeah, right. And
I'm trying to tweak the algorithm.
That's where I'm coming back to the hubris of calling it partisan. It's thinking that we know what it's doing. And exactly that, while we're trying to use the system against itself, because I was doing the same thing.
It's like we're paddling upstream in a rapid.
Right. While I was watching this, I thought I was doing the exact same thing. We're not only, you know, swimming upstream in the rapids, but we're swimming upstream in the rapids. And once we get over that hill, we're going to be in a still pond with fish much bigger than us. And that's exactly, like, that's the issue right now. Is you look at our two most recent our two most recent heads of state, right? Our two most recent presidents. And both of them disseminated a good deal of information through Twitter and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gave it power. If we go back to, and this is actually a relatively conservative value, if we go back to, everybody's doing the whole like fuck your feelings, like, and everyone's entitled to their opinions and blah 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 on both sides, where really we should go back to that common courtesy of you don't discuss religion, politics, and abortion in public. Like, you discuss those things in private forums. It is for our politicians to discuss that in public, but it is for them to discuss that in public in places like a debate where it is live and it is unfiltered, because that cannot be partisan. It can, obviously the questions can be partisan, but their answers are right there. There's no one there telling them this is how you should respond because this is how it'll go. And then it ends up on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram or on, you know, this website for this newspaper, that website for that newspaper, and then they feed you the pieces that they want. You know, when we're getting it direct from the source in an actual press conference where live we're being told things, which that's one of the things our most recent administration did very well, be it wittingly or not, was all of the press conferences. While a lot of them could be self-defeating because there were things being said like, let's inject bleach. Like, at the very least, and this isn't against him, this is for him. At the very least, we got his point of view in that particular moment unfiltered, right?
Well, that's the entire thing. That's why nothing should be censored at all. If you have if you have like Fox News did this recently actually, which shocked me. Well, it shocked me in a sense, but I mean they've been more corporatist than actually right wing for a long time.
Yes.
But they like
well, and keep in mind,
Kayleigh McEnany,
what they're doing right now isn't not right leaning. And that's something else everyone forgets during Trump's administration. The Republicans completely recused themselves of him during the election.
Oh,
Fox
they didn't want him. They didn't want him at all. Fox was not for Trump at all. But what happened?
Again, that's the thing I'm missing with them right now, where they're like, oh, they're saving their own asses. No, they're going back to their original conservative views because it's safe now.
Well, they're like, okay, well, Trump won. We're just not get on board this ship. We're just not hitch our wagon to this horse.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. They didn't want to get buried by the president of the United States.
Now they're seeing that things are changing. Like we're like Fox News being one of the first ones who announced dates for Biden, and then you had the White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. I hope I said that right.
Yeah,
she was speaking about allegations of fraud, and then Fox News is like, well, these aren't like they cut away saying, well, we can't verify this. I'm like, it doesn't fucking matter if you can verify it or not. It's news. If Trump is saying something, it's news. It needs to be shared. We need to know. If it's something that's unverifiable or something that's verifiably false, okay, let us hear it so we can verify it's false.
Right.
It's the picking and choosing what information we get to see. That's where things are very, very dangerous. That's where things skew wildly.
Yeah. And we allow that to happen when we have these discussions on Facebook.
But we need to talk about things publicly, though, because there's a balance. These discussions absolutely do need to be had publicly, but they need to be had in a respectful way. And we need to understand the limitations of this medium and not be so obsessed with it. We need to look at this as a medium for understanding each other, not scoring points on each other.
So the way that that's one of the ways you fight it, right? Is I'm not saying don't talk about these things in a public forum. I'm saying choose your public forum. I'm not
right, or choose the way you behave on the public forum.
You deprogram the algorithm, and that's entirely doable from a programming standpoint. That's entirely doable, right? Like the algorithm currently has all of this data, and it knows how you're going to react when you're posting these political things. It knows what direction to push you towards those political ends. If you stop discussing politics, religion, and abortion on Facebook, I don't have a timeline. Let's call it 10 years, right? Sounds like a hefty order, but and it could be as little as 2 months. The algorithm immediately changes itself based on what you're putting into it. And right now, the thing that creates the most conflict, and the thing that creates the most views is conflict. The things that create the most conflict are politics, religion, abortion, right? The three controversial topics that you don't write about because they cause conflict. You can change the algorithm to not feed off of conflict by removing that conflict. If we talk about our family, exactly that, if you put more positivity in there, but more specifically, you put in positivity that is not directly related to controversial topics, you change the algorithm.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I can speak to this because I since the election, or since at least election night, I have not been posting very much political stuff. It's been a lot more mental health, positivity, and funny memes. And my timeline is a much happier place. I'm not going to lie for a second. So it's not totally hopeless. We can manipulate it we can use the tool in a more positive fashion. But we just need to recognize the dangers, like alcohol. You can drink alcohol responsibly. You just need to realize the dangers of it when used improperly. Social media is no different in that analogy sense.
Yeah.
And it can be a great tool, or it could be.
That's how you change it, though. You change your public. So again, we do go back to not publicly discussing politics like that. We go back to our news sources. Let them do their manipulative stuff. Let CNN do CNN. Let Fox News do Fox News. Let MSNBC do MSNBC. You let all of them feed you the information they're going to, and you save those discussions for interpersonal conversation.
That limits a lot of ideas, though, geographically. Like being able to communicate these ideas. Like I talk to friends from Canada on Facebook, or friends who are in Pakistan through Facebook stuff. So it's limiting. Like I get what you're getting at for sure.
But
It's just people aren't gonna fucking do it.
you talk to them either in private groups. So you talk to them in a group such as the Chive page that is it's a group. It still feeds Facebook, but what you're seeing on your timeline is not based directly on what you're seeing in these groups. What you're going, the advertisements you're going to get in these groups are the advertisements you're going to get in these groups. And then you use time management. You make sure the amount of time that you're expending on these things in social media is less than the amount of time that you expend on positivity. You spend more time discussing, and that could be another way. Rather than getting rid of the politics, abortion, and religion on Facebook, you change the algorithm, because again, the algorithm is not partisan. It is not biased. It is going to feed you what is going to be most profitable. If you're spending 2 hours a day talking about your businesses, right? And talking about your families and talking about your friends, and 1 hour a day talking about politics, religion, and abortion, the algorithm will determine that this is what gets the most hits. This is what gets the most advertising space. This is what gets the most monetary return, right? So if I have one beer that's super profitable, but all of a sudden tomorrow I decide I'd really like to sell wine instead. I make wine more approachable. I make wine more readily available, and more people will buy my wine than my beer, just out of force. That is now what is available. So that's what's given. That's how these algorithms work. They determine what the most profitable course of action is, what's going to, exactly like they said in the Social Dilemma, what's going to keep you on the screen longer. If you spend longer on those other things and less time on the political posts, it takes away the power for it to change your political views. It's no longer profitable for them to change your political views, right? Like it doesn't sell them as much real estate with advertisers as it does for them to advertise families and friends and small businesses.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more we can get back into. We can do that for another time, though, because there's a big, deep conversation in whether or not these sites should be regulated like public utilities or not. And that's like a whole another thing we can get into.
I know.
And I do want to get into that with you for sure. Especially, I really want to rate Google over the coals specifically, but today was more about social media and the Facebook. But so I think we identified a lot of the problems with it, especially the core problems that everyone is overlooking. Yeah. So if you were like to summarize like what we should do going forward with this, I think it's, for me, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to be more mindful of the way I use social media. I'm trying to recognize that if I put negativity into it, I'm gonna get negativity out of it. It's very much a reciprocation machine. So and again, I've noticed, like I said, anecdotally, if I put more positivity out there, I get a lot more of it back. And I think that if we're just more mindful about the way we use these things, we recognize the traps that we can fall into, like stuff with like the dopamine hits you get. If you understand the way biology reacts to the things that Facebook is doing, with like things like making it a gambling machine, like making like a slot machine. If we see what they can do, then we can at least mitigate how much we use it. We can recognize falling into these dangerous patterns if we can see that we're feeding into it. But we also have to take responsibility. We have to realize that ultimately we are the ones who created this, literally and figuratively, and it is going to become whatever we make it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think from my takeaways, I'd say the exact same thing. You're going to, just like in life, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So my suggestions for changing habits would be to not even post less about things that jar you in a more negative manner, but spend less time. And they address this on the Social Dilemma as well. Spend less time on those posts. One of the things that I noticed was I was getting more and more things that affected my mental state negatively because I was reading more and more things that were affecting my mental state regularly. So when you start, if you start reading something and you start getting some of those negative emotions, take that step back, scroll past it. And when you find something like that puppy video that makes you happy, stay on that a little bit longer. You know, maybe even try timing yourself. Even if you're not looking at it, it's a 3-second video of a puppy, watch it 3 times.
Yep.
And then, or let it play on your phone 3 times while you're having a conversation. And this is not to increase the use of social media, but merely to reprogram it in your downtime. Like while I'm talking to you, I'll pull up, you know, Instagram and I'll scroll to something and that's funny. And then I'll set the phone down. You and I can have a conversation, and it's timing how long I'm on there. As far as the computer knows, that's time and attention I'm spending on that. So
Right.
reprogram more positivity into your social media. Spend less time on controversy in public internet forums for the time being. Have those discussions. Certainly have those discussions. Hell, start having more house parties. Well, obviously not during COVID. You know what I mean? Like,
as Thanksgiving's coming up and everyone has to eat outside with less than 10 people.
Right, but have more Zoom meetings. Like you can't have a house party. Like you don't
Start a
wanna
podcast.
Yeah, have a Zoom meeting and bring everyone in and take turns having those dialogues.
I do a lot of Zoom hangouts through other tribe groups and things like that. I'm on Zoom quite a bit, talking to people, communicating ideas. And again, it's a superior form of communication than Facebook.
Yeah,
You know, but Facebook is what brought us together. So again, it's a tool to be used in a way that's responsible, and you can be responsible with it. You can be irresponsible with it.
Yes.
If you see conversations about if you see a respectful conversation happening about, you know, a volatile topic, which is it's like seeing a unicorn, but maybe get involved with that one. But if you see just a complete dumpster fire, everyone's just flinging shit, scroll past it. Don't get involved. Don't even go in and like certain things and just stay out of it. Just scroll past the entire thing.
Right, and don't get involved with telling other people to uninvolve themselves. They're already in it, and that's more time and attention you're giving to it. Don't fall into the traps, into the negativity traps on social media.
Right.
I think what I would like to see, if you're down for it, I'm going to try and take some time to read through the Center for Humane Technology. It could also be propagated. There could be propaganda in there. I don't know yet. I haven't read it.
So I pulled it up when we were talking about earlier and looked at a couple of it. So the Center for Humane Technology is the website is humantech.com. I got it pulled up right here.
I do too.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I do want to read a quick bit of it, just a quick spot from like the What We Do section. And it says, tech platforms make billions of dollars keeping us clicking, scrolling, and sharing. Just like a tree is worth more as lumber and a whale is worth more dead than alive, in the attention extraction economy, a human is worth more when we are depressed, outraged, polarized, and addicted. And it goes into a lot more detail about issues that are going on and solutions.
Dilemma, by the way, like that.
Yeah.
That is
Well, it's Tristan Harris's Center for Foundation, so you know, of course, he was part of it. So things I recommend. So check out that website. I'll be reading more of it as well. Go check out Tristan Harris was on Joe Rogan recently.
I'm definitely going to.
He's been on quite a few podcasts since then too. I think Lex Friedman had him on. It's another phenomenal podcast.
He needs to legitimately care. Like this man's putting most of his wealth back into trying to fix these problems.
Right, and he testified in front of Congress. You can go check that out too. Tristan Harris, like he's been preaching this for a while, and I'm really happy that's getting the momentum that it really needs.
Real silent. Most if you don't look for it, you haven't seen that stuff. But I would like to, if we can, the next time we come back, honestly, maybe each have 3 or 4 solutions that we think will work to present.
For sure. And I'm probably going to find some of them going through the Center for Humane Technology.
Same. Maybe we'll come back with 2 or 3 of the same solutions. I'd be all about that.
Knowing us, we probably will have more commonalities than differences. But there'll probably be a couple other ones like, oh, I didn't think of that. So it's part of the beauty of our friendship, man.
Yeah, man. So, and for anybody that did see our last podcast, anyone who's still with us, believe it or not, we got through, I think, most of our talking tonight on camera. Last time we hopped off camera for 3 or 4 hours.
I think the total conversation, like the total Zoom call itself, was 5, maybe a little 5+ hours, give or take. Yeah. Another episode was an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It was like BV1, but yeah, well, we talked off the mic for a lot longer than on it. But this one, I mean, we talked a little bit beforehand, but I even intentionally said like, oh, we'll save it for when we hit record.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love that, because when the process that you and I had when we're going over like the miscommunication over like one word, or viewing things from different points, like
Yeah.
that entire process happened to us last time over a different topic,
Yeah.
but it wasn't during the recording. I'm really, really stoked that it happened here, because again,
Me
like
too.
we went through the full thing. We started off agreeing about things, then we started getting into a little bit of conflict. Our heads butted a little bit, but we worked through it. And guess what? We're still friends. I'm still stoked to see you again.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna give you a big hug when I do.
Yeah, man. And honestly, it's funny because it's like we were talking about how you said, like, this podcast is for you, this podcast is for me. It really is for us. Because the unfortunate thing about the long tangent to get where we are is we might lose people way before we get to the actual point.
Right.
So maybe a disclaimer in the front, like, hey, if you're not about the thing, like, fast forward to the end. That being said, I don't think anyone's going to truly understand it unless they watch it start to finish. Like, you
Right. I'm
really
very
need to watch us go through the process.
Yeah. I was cutting like little previews
Yeah.
before, but I'm very wary of taking any part of a conversation like this, especially out, because if anything, that could be. It's tough to find that certain right spot where it's not going to be taken out of context, but still like gives you enough interest to draw you in. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I don't want to misrepresent any of my friends or what they say, or any of my guests in general. I don't want
Yeah.
anyone to be able to misconstrue that. I want this to be in its entirety the conversation. You know, because
And
it's
unfiltered, uncensored, um, non-algorithmic conversation. And that's just it. Is when we do filter those things out to make it more appealing to people, we're doing exactly what we program Facebook to do, to remove the pieces that are not going to draw people in and keep the things in there. We know statistically, if a video is this long, people will watch it. If it's longer than that, people won't. Watch those longer videos, guys. Like, I'm not even saying that this is worth your time. Maybe it's not, but watch those longer videos. Like, watch the start to finishes. Look at more unfiltered content that's not cut and cropped, and like, quit relying on taking those pieces of cut and crop and put them together. Like, have those conversations in person. Have those.
see and hear the entire thing and make the opinion for yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Take away. So I mean, the tagline for this show is conversation that cuts through the noise, but really it might be conversation that cuts through the algorithm.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, I love you so much, man. Thank you for coming on here again. We're definitely going to do it and get into it a lot more. And happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully I'll see you. I mean, I'll see you after that, but
Yeah.
either way, Mal, I'm sure I'll talk to you before then too.
Yeah. I should have a new webcam by then too. So maybe I'll start casting. So that might be part of what I use to break myself from social media. I might start podcasting myself just for my own manner, and like, that'll go on to social media. But that's a, like, unfiltered, like, here's my thoughts, and if you want to have a discussion with it, you got my phone number, call me.
Right, and that's why I'm so, like, we talked yesterday, because I try to release episodes every Thursday. Like, I'm going to release this tonight. Once we get done, I'm going to do, the little bit of editing I do, I'm going to put it up there. But, like, I'm always very, very wary. I've done a couple episodes where it's just me talking, and I don't like that as much. Not because I'm not comfortable talking. I can talk indefinitely.
Yeah.
Because if I'm just talking, there's no one to counterbalance what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I speak out about having conversation and about having nuance with things, but if no one's there to bounce ideas back at me, what's the point?
You're right. You're just adding to that
I
potential.
don't want people to just take my opinions for things and see that's their gospel. I'm not here to preach at you. I'm not a journalist or some kind of figurehead. I'm a person that wants to have human conversations, and the fact that some people might get from things from it, like I do from other human conversations, is a plus. But again, like you said, that I said, this is for me. It's my podcast. It's my show. It's my chance to get my friends to sit down, have conversations, and get to know them on a deeper, personal, human level.
Yeah, man.
And I fucking love it. So, anything you want to plug, bud?
I got nothing plugged today. If anybody's looking to have some lighthearted conversation and get to know me a little bit better, Hourglass Brewing, Hourglass District, man.
If you get a chance, definitely go by there whenever you can, because you're not locked down or anything now. Florida's safe.
We're open. We do keep things socially responsible. We do require masks when people are in the building. Till you're seated and drinking as per the current government standards. We've got outdoor seating, but I'm there during the day on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So if you ever want to sit down and just, chat, if a big thing, we just recently came through like the time of year where we're going into the family time of year. If you're having a hard time and you just need company, come have a seat. Like seriously, come have a seat, come sit down. We'll talk. If you got to talk about anything, you just want someone to listen, I'll do it. I'll be there for you, man. Like that's what we're there for.
That old school like bartender confidentiality thing, like so you feel comfortable talking. It's like therapy, bartender therapy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, definitely go check out Hourglass Brewing. Check out Humane Tech. It's Humane Tech. Sorry, humanetech.com. And then as much as they are speaking out against using the algorithms, use the algorithms for something good. Go check out my podcast website. Go check out Tim Mills Razor on all the social media platforms, but don't spend a whole lot of time there. Go outside, have some fun, and share some good ideas instead of the negativity. Love you guys. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.